Chapter 1150. The little princess in the live stream room was shocked. Some of the old fans in the live broadcast room could not take it anymore, let alone the newcomers. Ping Qiu, I'm a newbie in the live streaming room. This is the first time I've gotten a spot. In the past, he had always heard people say that Zhang Bapi had an aura of 2.8 meters and that even the king of hell would be afraid of him when he glared at him. At that time, he had thought that it was a sensational story. No matter how strong the aura is, can it be stronger than my Zhang? Now that I've seen it for myself, it really lives up to its name. My Zhang was instantly crushed. The Xueqi streamer's aura is more than 2.8 meters, it's clearly the distance between two dimensions. Zhu Xiao, you're Zhang? Oh, the popular actress who imitates the streamer's character and keeps on King the Queen? Duan Lu, Tisk, that Xiao Hua who changed her name to Pengxi streamer. Let's not talk about her. My streamer always likes to speak with facts. She won't use tricks like drinking, eating, and sleeping with people to get ahead. There were so many problems in the entertainment industry. There would always be people who did not learn their lessons. Zhang Pengji's streaming room had been around for many years, and its popularity was always at the top of the charts. In the early years, many newcomers in the entertainment industry would copy the characters in the live broadcast room and rely on that to become popular. However, setting up a person's persona was not something that could be easily messed up. Not to mention, there was still the main body in front of him. Even so, there were still many people who chose this path in order to take a shortcut. As the lord with the most fans in the streaming room, Zhang Pengji naturally had the most fans. However, her fan group was toxic. There were too many big shots from all walks of life. Many young stars who imitated Zhang Pengji's persona were defeated by them. As time passed, the newcomers didn't dare to do it again. Yiwu Yanling, what? Which unsightly flower came out to blackmail the host again? Can you imitate the host's aura? Xin Yue. I'm going to beat it up. With these topics, the audience's taut nerves finally relaxed. Seeing that the limelight had passed, the audience slowly returned to the joking atmosphere from before. There were too many topics for them to talk about, and they had been holding it in just now. If it wasn't for the tense atmosphere, they would have flooded the screen with bullet screens. Women's harms. Qin Gong, let me hug you and comfort you. Even if you're disfigured, you're still the fattest. Blooming thorns. Qin Gong's wound is very dangerous. If it was a little more to the side, he might be the next Xiahou Dun. Because of Xie arrow, Qin Gong was injured by a stray arrow, and a palm-sized wound appeared on his face. The wound was a little deep and could easily leave a scar. However, Qin Gong did not mind. He was a man and a general at that. Scars were the best medals. Wukong Daodu. I even asked for a protective talisman for Rongrong. Haha, sure enough, a scourge lives for 1,000 years. The host has come at the right time. Huan Sun Fengchao de Gui Qi. Sigh, it's not exactly in time. If it was a few hours earlier, more than 3,000 casualties could have been avoided. Speaking of the tragic battle in the Lonely Hill Canyon, the hearts of the spectators became much heavier. Zhang Pengji was a qualified streamer. She streamed live every day. Her influence and her team were built up through the eyes of the audience. They put themselves in Zhang Pengji's shoes, and the soldiers were their blood and sweat. With so many casualties, how could he not feel heartache? However, as Zhang Pengji had said, how could there be no deaths in war? They only hoped that the chaotic world would end soon, so that they could happily accompany Zhang Pengji to watch the show. Zhang Pengji's originally relaxed mood suddenly sank a little when she saw the bullet screen. Yang Si called himself a sinner. He did not know that Zhang Pengji also blamed herself, but she did not show it. She felt a little sad emotionally, but her rationality told her that the soldiers had died for a reason. Their deaths had brought about the situation that Zhang Pengji wanted the most. Perhaps she had been assimilated into the ancient times. If it was her in the past, she would not even bat an eyelid. She finished eating without changing her expression. Zhang Pengji glanced at a few bullet screen comments. Xiaoshui Wushuang. Let me ask you weakly. Didn't you notice that the host's weapon is a little strange? Lao Siji Lianming. It's indeed very strange. The style of the knife is somewhat like a tang knife. I can't tell the material, but its hardness is definitely more terrifying than the well-tempered steel that we know. I just went to the Tieba forum and found the recording of today's stream. I dragged it back to watch it and found a very shocking fact. The host used her knife to easily cut through several tiger-headed bronze shields. Needless to say, she cut through several people's bodies with one knife. We can't even achieve this level of knife craftsmanship in our era. Do you think the host can do it in this era? The onlookers saw that Jiang Pengji was unstoppable. Apart from double-clicking 666, she basically did nothing else. Those big shots were different. Their focus was different from ordinary people. The knife in Jiang Pengji's hand was obviously unusually strong. Wu Yue Xue. Could it be alien technology? Tangerine soft candy. Maybe it was made by a cultivator? Shimo Ning. Could it be that a super powerful person saw that the host needed to change her knife every time she fought and couldn't help but mail her one? The onlookers used their own black holes of imagination. Some people integrated their imaginations into a story with a beginning and an end. Sankei. Haha, maybe the host has a super terrifying backer. This backer is a super powerful person from the cultivation world. He pitted the host for having to change her weapon every time she fought, so he couldn't help but use alien technology to make a plug-in weapon for her? Jiang Pengji looked coldly at the onlookers as they let their imaginations run wild. She thought that it was scary enough that Wei Ci guessed that she was a man in her previous life, until she met the onlookers in the streaming room. She was still too young. However, the origin of the God Slayer was indeed a mystery. She didn't want to explain it, so she let them make wild guesses. The name list of those who died in the war must be sorted out as soon as possible. Add another layer of compensation. Jiang Pengji paused and added, "They died for me. I can't just leave their corpses in a foreign land. Collect their corpses properly tomorrow. This matter cannot be neglected." Yes. Everyone responded. Jiang Pengji continued, "Jingrong, it's been hard on you these days." More than 10,000 troops had penetrated deep into the enemy's territory. It was already a great achievement for Yang Si to react quickly and preserve most of his troops. More importantly, they now had sufficient reason to attack Su Pei. She would repay him tenfold in the future for how many of her soldiers were injured by Su Pei today. Little did she know that Su Pei was sitting on pins and needles. While Jiang Pengji was reorganizing her troops, Han Yu led his troops back to Shanwu City. Su Pei thought that Han Yu would return in 1 or 2 days. He didn't expect that he would be delayed for so long. In the end, he didn't get what he wanted. They didn't manage to wipe out the enemy. There was a gap between reality and his imagination. Su Pei was in a bad mood, but he didn't show it on his face. Not only did he not blame Han Yu and Xie Zhe, but he also rewarded them greatly and organized a banquet for them. Han Yu had something he wanted to say to Su Pei, but there were too many people around. He could only restrain himself. Halfway through the banquet, Su Pei got up to change his clothes. After changing, Su Pei prepared to return to the banquet. "My lord, I am the assistant general under Captain Xie's command. I have an important matter to report to my lord." Su Pei frowned. When he heard the identity of the person, he waved his hand to dismiss the guards and called the assistant general forward. "What is it that you can't say at the banquet? Why must you talk about it in private?" Chapter 1151. Su Bei's indifferent attitude changed upon hearing this. His face darkened and his eyes darkened. A mere deputy general dared to insult Han Yu in front of him. Who gave him the courage? Su Bei thought to himself, but his expression did not change. He said, "Wenbin has always been generous. Why would he bear a grudge? If what you say is reasonable, he will accept it humbly." These were Su Bei's heartfelt words. Although Han Yu was stubborn and occasionally offended him, he was truly loyal to him. Who wouldn't like a loyal remonstrant who had never formed a clique? The deputy general's heart skipped a beat. Su Bei's words clearly showed that he trusted Han Yu. He had taken the risk to snitch to Su Bei. This action had offended Han Yu to the core. If even the Lord did not believe him, wouldn't he be ruining his future? Now that the arrow was knocked on the bowstring, it had to be released. His back was drenched in sweat as he braced himself and revealed everything he knew. The deputy general said, "I know I am guilty. It is unbecoming of a gentleman to talk behind someone's back. However, military advisor Han monopolizes military power and is arrogant. He has changed military orders several times, causing delays in battle. Now, He is even shamelessly claiming credit and deceiving the Lord. How can I betray my loyalty and pretend not to know? Su Bei was suspicious when he heard this. Although Han Yu had a straightforward personality and offended people easily, none of the civil and military officials in the tent had ever criticized Han Yu in this aspect. At most, they would say that Han Yu had a bad temper and was overbearing. However, this was not a major problem. What do you mean by that? If there is no evidence, then this is a false accusation. Su Bei's voice deepened. His eyes carried a hint of fierceness as he stared at the Deputy General. The Deputy General steeled his heart and said, "Military Advisor Han let Lu Shi go. Isn't this a major crime?" Su Bei almost choked on his own saliva. He could not be blamed for losing his composure. The Deputy General's words were too shocking. What did he mean by Han Yu let Lu Shi go? Lu Shi was in the midst of an army of tens of thousands. How could Han Yu let her go? Tell me in detail. What exactly happened? The Deputy General had already taken a gamble. He had already prepared for the worst. He did not expect Su Bei to not blame him and instead ask him about it. Seeing this, the Deputy General knew that there was hope. He said, "Although Military Advisor Han has some weapons, the commander of the entire army is Commandant Xie." The Deputy General was about to say that Han Yu was bossing Xie around, monopolizing military power, and complaining about the injustice done to his own general. However, Su Bei was not in the mood to listen. "Tell me why Wenbin let Lu Shi go first. Put the rest aside for now." The Deputy General felt wronged and swallowed the rest of the words back into his stomach. He said concisely, "Yang Si and the others should have been buried in Gushu." Unexpectedly, Military Counselor Han made a mistake in his command, giving the thieves a chance to linger on. After that, their reinforcements arrived, and General Han retreated without a fight. If that's the case, I have the right to act as the military advisor when he saw that the situation wasn't looking good and promptly stopped the losses. But the military advisor had already recognized that the leader of the reinforcements was Lu Shi. Su Bei felt that this was a joke. Lu Shi had personally led troops and rushed over from afar to save Yang Si and the others? This must be fake, right? This was what Su Bei was thinking, but the Deputy General's expression was not fake. For a moment, his heart wavered. Lu Shi's martial prowess is indeed extraordinary, and her temperament is restless. It is possible that she will personally take action. The Deputy General could not help but interrupt Su Bei's words. He said, "Lu Shi's reinforcements are less than 3,000, and the remnants of Yang Si and the others have either escaped or are injured. Our army still has 20,000 troops. Why can't we fight?" Without thinking, Military Counselor Han changed the military order and forced Colonel Xie to order a retreat. "My lord, Military Counselor Han has missed a great opportunity. His intentions are unforgivable. If we can exchange for Lu Shi's head, I believe that these 20,000 soldiers will definitely not feel pity for themselves. For my lord, even if they have to sacrifice their lives, they will let Lu Shi stay." But Military Counselor Han ordered a retreat. At this point, the Deputy General felt wronged and his eyes reddened. He was truly loyal to Su Bei and Xie. If he could exchange 20,000 lives for Jiang Pengji's head, he was willing to do it. Because he was very clear that if he did not do it now, he would have to pay with even more casualties in the future. Su Bei looked calm on the surface, but his heart was in turmoil. He said to the Deputy General, "Tell me everything you know. Don't hide anything." The Deputy General was overjoyed and hurriedly said, "Yes." Su Bei took a long time to change his clothes this time. Han Yu was worried that he had met with an accident and became the second Wu Ma Shang. He was about to send someone to ask when Su Bei rushed back. By then, the banquet was more than half over. Everyone had drunk 3 rounds of wine and was tipsy. Han Yu noticed that Su Bei's face was a little gloomy. He thought to himself, "Is there any bad news?" Thinking about the current situation, Han Yu frowned deeply. Worry was written all over his face. "Wenbin, are you troubled by something?" Cheng Yuan looked away from the performance and turned his gaze to Han Yu, who was not in the right mood. During the period when Han Yu had led the troops to pursue Yang Si, Su Bei had put Cheng Yuan in an important position. Therefore, Cheng Yuan's seat at the banquet was closer to the front. It's just a few matters. The banquet was not a place to discuss matters. Han Yu could only vaguely refer to it. Chang Yuan understood, but he believed in his lord's strength. She might not lose to Jiang Pengji. How can Lu Shi and his kind be mentioned in the same breath as my lord? Even if they have a moment of glory, in the end, they will be like a shooting star in the night sky, vanishing in the blink of an eye. Just like her humble family, which had no foundation, they would eventually be annihilated along with the chaos of the world. Han Yu did not comment. He was too lazy to correct Chang Yuan's stubborn thoughts. While Chang Yuan was frantically cheering for his lord, Su Bei's gaze wandered to Han Yu. A strange look flashed in his eyes. He trusted Han Yu, but the deputy general's words made him feel very uncomfortable. Han Yu had 20,000 troops under his command. How could he not defeat a few thousand defeated soldiers? Knowing that the enemy's vassals were right in front of their formation, Han Yu did not think about killing them. Instead, he gave such a ridiculous order to retreat. Su Bei knew how terrifying Jiang Pengji's combat power was, but it was difficult for one person to fight against 4/5 of a group. No matter how powerful a person was, an army of 20,000 using the tactic of head-on fighting against him would always be able to kill him. As long as Jiang Pengji could die, so what if the 20,000 soldiers were sacrificed? To put it more bluntly, so what if Han Yu himself was sacrificed? Was it not worth it? Jiang Pengji was still single. She did not have any heirs to carry on her will. If she died, the forces in Wanzhou that had gathered together because of her would collapse. Even if Lu Shi was still around, he had retired for many years and had long stopped caring about the affairs of the world. Even if he came back, what use would he be? Why did Han Yu let go of such a good opportunity? Su Bei had also thought about it. Perhaps Han Yu had his own considerations. But could these considerations be worth the lives of the enemy's vassals? After the banquet, Han Yu went to see Su Bei in private. Han Yu wanted to talk about this matter. As a member of the aristocratic family, Su Bei did not show any signs of dissatisfaction on the surface, even though he was dissatisfied. Chapter 1152. Su Bei had intended to use the art of checks and balances to promote others to divide the power in Han Yu's hands. Han Yu had no objection to this. After all, extreme prosperity leads to decline. If he was placed in too much of an important position, Su Bei would question and be wary of him sooner or later. On the other hand, this could also provide opportunities for talented people to cultivate more useful people for the Lord. The prosperity of a force couldn't depend on one person. It needed 100 flowers to bloom together. Han Yu wasn't an autocratic person. Su Bei intended to check and balance the power, so he took the opportunity to give others opportunities. It was the best of both worlds. Late one night, an unexpected person climbed over the wall of his house. Han Yu looked at Xueqi, who was dressed in black, speechless. Why couldn't you talk about it during the day in the government office? Why did you have to climb over his wall in the middle of the night? He tightened the cloak on his shoulders with a bronze lamp in his right hand. Han Yu changed his clothes and returned to his room in the middle of the night. He was almost scared to death when he saw a dark shadow squatting outside his door. What is Commandant Xie doing? Han Yu smiled bitterly. If it weren't for the fact that he had a good personal relationship with Xueqi, he would have called the guards to beat Xueqi out of the room. While observing Xueqi's hesitant expression, he raised his hand and pushed the door open. He couldn't help but laugh. Commandant Xie, you'd better go inside and talk. If the night patrol sees us, I don't know what kind of rumors will spread the next day. Han Yu lit up the lamp. The room was brighter under the illumination of the lamp. Xueqi followed him into the room. Han Yu teased him when he saw that he didn't speak. All the soldiers in the army say that Commandant Xie is an upright man. Who would have thought that you have the hobby of a gentleman on a beam? Climbing over someone's wall in the middle of the night? Xueqi's cheeks turned red from the teasing and he stuttered. He didn't know what to say. In the end, he knelt down and apologized. Han Yu was shocked and quickly helped him up. Commandant Xie, please get up. What are you doing? Xueqi said, Military counselor, I didn't manage properly. I let the assistant general take advantage of the loophole and slandered the Lord. Han Yu was confused. Why did you say that? Xueqi was so ashamed that he refused to get up. He stammered out the whole story. Xueqi wouldn't have known that his deputy had stabbed Han Yu in the back, if it wasn't for the fact that his deputy had spilled the beans and badmouthed Han Yu in front of him. Every word that the deputy general had said to Su Bei had pierced through his heart. Xueqi suddenly understood when he thought of his lord's attitude toward Han Yu. This was not the tacit understanding between the lord and Han Yu at all. It was obvious that the lord was really dissatisfied. She might even be suspicious. As Xueqi continued, the smile on Han Yu's face gradually faded away. What was left was a chilling coldness. There seemed to be an undercurrent of coldness in his eyes. Counselor, Xueqi was interrupted by Han Yu. Forget it. I already know about this matter. Thank you for coming so late at night to inform me. Han Yu's voice wasn't as clear and bright as usual. Instead, it carried a chill that made people's hair stand on end. He seemed to be brewing something. Xueqi opened his mouth, unable to utter a single word. Han Yu paused and said, I plan to stay at home for a few days. I won't be seeing any guests. If there's nothing important, please don't come to visit. Xueqi was the most important general under Su Bei's command. He held military power in his hands. If he got too close to Han Yu, neither of them would be in a good position. Han Yu lowered his eyelids to hide the thoughts in his eyes. Xueqi couldn't help but want to put in a good word for Su Bei to ease the tense relationship between Su Bei and Han Yu. Before he could open his mouth, Han Yu laughed and said, You don't have to be so cautious, Lieutenant Xie. I know what I'm doing. Su Bei was the lord that he had personally chosen. How could he be disappointed in Su Bei just because of a moment of suspicion? It would be abnormal if there were no stumbles between the lord and his subordinate. After Xueqi left, the smile on Han Yu's face returned to normal. He sat in front of the table and watched the flickering candlelight. There was an undercurrent in his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. After a long while, Han Yu let out a long sigh, blew out the candlelight, and went to sleep. Now that the great battle was imminent, no matter how afraid Su Bei was, he would not truly touch him. He could use this time to dispel his opponent's worries. Jiang Pengji led the troops to rush to Yang Xi's aid. Within a few days, the main army also hurried over and successfully joined forces with Jiang Pengji. Yang Xi, who was holed up in the tent, heard that the army had arrived. He hurriedly kicked away the thin blanket covering his body and angrily looked for Qiguan Rang to settle the score. Since his martial strength was not enough, he called Qin Gong over. Qin Gong was also an injured soldier, but he practiced martial arts all year round and had a strong body. His injuries were heavier than Yang Xi's, but he recovered much faster than Yang Xi. Advisor Yang, wait a moment. Where are you going? Yang Xi stopped in his tracks and said with a fierce expression, Of course I'm looking for the culprit, the one who put us in such a difficult situation. Qiguan Rang's declaration of war had really screwed him over. If not for his lord's timely arrival, he would have already gone to the King of Hell, drank Granny Meng's soup, and crossed the bridge of helplessness. The corpse was cold. Qin Gong was still a newbie, and the forces of Wanzhou were unfamiliar to him. Who gave him the courage to diss the elders before even bowing to them? Was it Yang Xi? Isn't this very offensive? So be it, Yang Xi said, feeling wronged. I almost lost my life. Isn't this even more aggrieved? But advisor. Qin Gong was dragged away by Yang Xi. The patrolling soldiers saw the way the two of them were tugging at each other, and it attracted countless strange looks. The newbie Qin Gong was thin-skinned, and he quickly blushed. If the Lord finds out, what should we do? Picking a fight for no reason and violating military discipline. Be careful that the Lord makes life difficult for him. Yang Xi said. If the Lord finds out, then so be it. According to her temperament, it's good enough that she didn't add fuel to the fire. Qin Gong was speechless. He slandered the Lord behind her back and still acted very sloppy and normal. Such a non-mainstream relationship between the Lord and his minister was really an eye-opener for him. Yang Xi said he would go to the door. He asked where Qiguan Rang's tent was and directly pulled Qin Gong over. Before entering the tent, he smelled the aroma of food. He opened the tent and happened to hear Qiguan Rang and Wei Ci chatting and laughing. Look, they're here. Qin Gong was speechless. Qiguan Rang and Wei Ci looked at the two people outside the tent. Seeing them enter, the former got up and bowed deeply to them. Yang Xi saw this ostentatious display and felt very upset. Qiguan Rang had taken the initiative to apologize and admit defeat. He felt that his fist had landed on cotton, and all his grievances had dissipated. He simply gave himself a way out and said, I heard that Wen Zhang is holding a banquet. Can we welcome a couple of uninvited guests? Qiguan Rang smiled and said, You're most welcome. Qin Gong looked left and right, still a little confused. He really couldn't understand the tricks of the literati group. Yang Si held a soup spoon in his left hand and ate. Qin Gong also ate a meal. Wei Si saw that he was frowning deeply, as if troubled by something. He asked with a smile, What is Feng Jing worried about? Qin Gong saw that the person who asked was Wei Si, a man who was more beautiful than a woman. He immediately blushed and casually made an excuse. It's nothing much. I'm just wondering. The march is tough, and this dish looks, smells, and tastes good. I wonder how military advisor Qiguan prepared it. Wei Si smiled and said, In order to make amends to Jing Rong, Wen Zhang secretly promised me many good things. Qin Gong was speechless. Chapter 1153. Jiang Pengji heard about Qiguan Rang inviting Yang Si to a banquet to make amends. As the Lord, she had yet to say anything, but the audience had already excitedly opened their bets. Long Shui Shijiang. Qiguan Rang wants to bribe little Rongrong with just one meal? Naive, childish, and overestimating himself. At least 2 meals. Nianzuo Zuzidi. Little Rongrong almost lost her life this time. 1 meal is definitely not enough. Yuxing Fan. The people above are all salted fish. No matter what, Yang Si is still a strategist. Have you ever seen a strategist change his stance for food? Some of the audience happily joined in the fun, while others were more realistic. Whether it was Yang Si or Qiguan Rang, they were both intelligent white and black people, not kindergarten kids. When kindergarten kids had a conflict, a lollipop could reconcile, and a big meal could make them as close as wearing a pair of pants. These 2 white and black people had a conflict. Who knows, they might be at each other's throats from now on. Of course, this was not what worried them the most. They were most worried that Qiguan Rang and Yang Si's discord would cause internal divisions in Wanzhou. The audience raised their heads in anticipation, eager to know the final outcome. Jiang Pengji was also quite curious. I heard that Wanjing asked Zixiao to cook yesterday? Jiang Pengji said with a smile, Zixiao's cooking skills are excellent. Jing Rong got lucky. Qiguan Rang waved his feather fan lightly. When he heard Jiang Pengji mention yesterday's incident, his calm eyes stirred up some waves. Zixiao's cooking skills are indeed good. Even the royal chef is slightly inferior. If Jing Rong knew that the person who cooked was Zixiao, I'm afraid she would stick to him. As they spoke, Jiang Pengji saw a bullet screen. Longan Babeo Kanji. Didn't the ancients say that a gentleman should stay away from the kitchen? Even if Zixiao's cooking skills are really good, isn't it a deliberate provocation for Qiguan Rang to ask Zixiao to cook? He felt a little uncomfortable at the thought. It was as if Qiguan Rang was using Zixiao as a cook. According to the audience's understanding, Qiguan Rang's actions were inappropriate. However, he had really wronged Qiguan Rang. In Yuejia Zhuge Qinma. What does a gentleman should stay away from the kitchen have to do with cooking? If you want to say that it sounds hypocritical, I can understand. These words came from the Mencius. The original sentence was, a gentleman is like a beast. When he sees it alive, he cannot bear to see it die. When he hears its sound, he cannot bear to eat its flesh. This is why a gentleman keeps his distance from the kitchen. In layman's terms, not entering the kitchen was because one did not want to hear the screams of livestock. This was because one would not have the heart to eat or kill. It was not to say that a gentleman should not cook. However, with the evolution of society, many words have been deliberately twisted. For example, a woman's virtue is to have no talent. The original meaning has been twisted to the point that even his mother wouldn't recognize it. Be it a gentleman or a villain, they all had to eat. Otherwise, they would have starved to death. Qiguan Rang privately asked Wei Si, who had excellent culinary skills, to help him. He did not mean to look down on him. If it was really a humiliation, would Wei Si foolishly agree? Qiguan Rang did not know about the existence of the bullet screen and said, My lord's prediction is correct. Zixiao has been entangled. Jiang Pengji imagined the scene of Yang Si surrounding and intercepting Wei Si in her mind. She could not help but laugh involuntarily. After a moment of silence, Jiang Pengji suddenly opened her mouth. The blame for this disaster lies on me. This time, Wanjing has been wronged. You have to take the blame for me. Jiang Pengji had asked for the declaration of war. Qiguan Rang had merely obeyed her orders. If one wanted to nitpick, the most one could say was that Qiguan Rang's declaration of war was too hurtful, causing Su Bei to fly into a rage out of humiliation. In this matter, Jiang Pengji and Yang Si each had 50% of the responsibility. Qiguan Rang was merely an innocent bystander. He did not do anything wrong, but he had to bear Yang Si's wrath. From Qiguan Rang's perspective, he felt rather wronged. If Qiguan Rang and Yang Si quarreled, Jiang Pengji would not blame them. She decisively admitted her mistake, causing Qiguan Rang to look at her in astonishment. According to the mainstream thinking of the ancient times, it was impossible for the Lord to be wrong. The only ones who were wrong were the officials. Taking Jiang Pengji's case as an example, she felt that she was wrong. However, from the perspective of Qiguan Rang and the others, this was not the case. As the conspirators, they did not discover the hidden dangers. They did not advise the Lord in time, causing her to make a mistake. Hence, the responsibility was on them. This logic was unreasonable in Jiang Pengji's eyes, but the others did not find anything wrong with it. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Do I look like the kind of person who will not admit to my crimes? Jiang Pengji teased him with a smile. She and Qiguan Rang were not only the Lord's officials but also good friends. They were quite casual when it did not involve official matters. She did not put on airs. Do you want me to cook a meal for you personally? Qiguan Rang lowered his eyelids and said faintly, My lord said that she was wrong, but I am innocent. Why do you have to punish me? Jiang Pengji did not react for a moment. She only reacted after a while. Qiguan Rang was mocking her for her poor cooking skills. Eating the food she cooked was like being punished. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Their friendship was over. The reaction of the audience in the streaming room was even more unbridled. They changed their ways to ridicule Qiguan Rang. At the same time, they called Qiguan Rang like crazy. These days, it was rare to see a subordinate who dared to directly contradict his own boss. Tudu Feiqiu, boss Qiguan does not have a strong presence, but he is a boss. His EQ is high. Lao Siji Lianming, not only does boss Qiguan have a high EQ, but he is also truly loyal to the streamer. If this happened to me, I would definitely be angry. Yang Si did not look for the culprit but attacked me instead. I am not going to take the blame for this. Once things get out of hand, it will not just be a conflict between two strategists. It will even shake the streamer's power. For example, choosing sides, forming cliques and so on. Boss Qiguan Rang must have known about this situation, so he took the initiative to take a step back. Yang Si also knew when to stop. Both of them took a step back. The world was clear. Everyone understood this simple logic. Which of the strategists was not a shrewd person? But it was not easy to take a step back. This concerned one's face and dignity. Many people knew that it was wrong to do so, but they would often be aggressive for their own interests. For the sake of the overall situation and internal harmony, Qiguan Rang decisively took a step back. From this, one could see his breadth of mind and foresight. The crisis that could have caused a conflict disappeared just like that. Only one person was very frustrated. Wei Ci was targeted by Yang Si. In order to avoid this glutton, Wei Ci could only escape to Jiang Pengji's place to hide. Such a glutton, sooner or later he will fall because of this. Jiang Pengji commented. Ever since Yang Si entered her camp, she had often commented on him like this. Wei Ci said, Isn't that so? He doesn't learn his lesson in 2 lifetimes. Fortunately, Jiang Pengji had already turned off the streaming room. Otherwise, Wei Ci's words would have blown up the audience. Jiang Pengji had a smile in her eyes. She asked casually, Why? Jing Rong has fallen because of this before? Chapter 1154. Zuda? Jiang Pengji searched in her mind before she could match the person. The Zuda you mentioned, is it Tang Yao? Jiang Pengji was not very interested in Wei Ci's past life. She rarely took the initiative to ask about it, unless she was bored and wanted to listen to stories to kill time. Tang Yao and Jing Rong don't seem to have any interactions? Why are they fighting each other? In their previous lives, Zuda and Jing Rong were both Huangsong officials. Zuda was born in an aristocratic family, so he attached great importance to his family status. Jing Rong was born in a poor family, But Huang Song put her in an important position. Of course the two of them didn't get along. The discord between them ran deep. Wei Ci knew Jiang Pengji's temperament. Telling her these things would not affect her trust in Yang Si. Her Majesty took the initiative to befriend Jing Rong and frequently gifted her with delicious food and delicacies. At first, it was nothing, but as time went on, Yang Si and Huang Song grew apart. After that, he used several successive stratagems to sow discord. Jing Rong had no choice but to seek refuge with His Majesty. Yang Si did not jump ship because of his gluttony, but the cause of his jump ship was indeed because of his gluttony. In his previous life, if it weren't for Tang Yao's godly assistance, the possibility of Yang Si taking the initiative to jump ship wasn't high. Jiang Pengji listened with great interest. She did not forget to mock him. I'm afraid that Jing Rong is going to regret his actions. If it's recorded in the history books, the future generations will know that he made a mistake because of his gluttony. This reason was really shameful. She could totally imagine what the students of later generations would call Yang Si, foodie. Wei Ci pursed his lips and smiled. Wasn't that right? In his previous life, Yang Si had often hugged him and poured out his grievances. This dark history was simply an unspeakable pain in life. Jiang Pengji asked again, "What about Tang Yao?" Wei Ci lowered his eyelids and said lightly, "After Huang Song was defeated, he committed suicide." He wasn't lying, but he wasn't completely lying either. Under Huang Song's command, Tang Yao often gave Yang Si a hard time. The two of them were always at loggerheads with each other. Tang Yao even used the excuse of being drunk to point at the mulberry tree and scold the locust tree that Yang Si was the son of a prostitute. Yang Si endured the humiliation. Later, when Huang Song was defeated, he returned the humiliation to Tang Yao. In the end, Tang Yao could not bear the humiliation and was forced by Yang Si to commit suicide by hitting the wall. It couldn't be said that Yang Si was wrong in this matter, but his means of revenge were indeed somewhat vicious. Wei Ci did not want his lord to be dissatisfied with Yang Si because of this. Jiang Pengji did not question further. Tang Yao should be compiling books with Master Yuan Jing now, right? Wei Ci said, "This is more suitable for him. It's also safe for him." The world was in chaos and the feudal lords were in internal strife. It was either you die or I live. With Tang Yao's temperament, he would be fine under any lord, but he was indeed not suitable for Jiang Pengji. The pride of an aristocratic family had long since melted into his bones and was deeply rooted. It wasn't something that could be corrected with just a few words. Rather than letting him come into contact with power and provoke discord among the forces in Wanzhou, it was better to let him make the best use of him and follow the teacher in writing books. Not to mention anything else, Tang Yao's knowledge and literary talent were truly impeccable. You're right. Writing books is more suitable for him. Jiang Pengji furrowed her brows. She was short of manpower at the moment, but she would rather have none than have a substandard one. Tang Yao was indeed talented, but he was indeed not suitable for her at the moment. He won't quit while he's ahead like Jing Rong, and he won't take the initiative to give in like Wen Zheng. The biggest possibility was that he would argue for what was right and put everyone on the spot. Jiang Pengji and Su Bei had completely shed all pretense of cordiality. After Gu Su Gorge, she had Qiguan Rang write a declaration of war. The previous declaration of war was a public condemnation, but this one was an official declaration of war. When Su Bei received the declaration of war, he flew into a rage. He immediately sent someone to write a declaration of war to scold them. It was a joyous scolding battle. As the conflict of public opinion escalated, the smell of gunpowder between the two parties became more and more intense. Su Bei followed Han Yu's previous suggestion and mobilized his troops in preparation for war. Jiang Pengji was not to be outdone. She occupied the Sichuan plains to train her troops, and at the same time, she ordered the rear to transport more weapons and rations. At this juncture, Su Bei played a trick in private. He sent a messenger to Huang Song's side to persuade him, preparing to form an alliance with Huang Song to resist Jiang Pengji. This suggestion was jointly proposed by Han Yu and Cheng Sun. The officials in the tent all agreed. Although they didn't want to admit it, compared to Jiang Pengji, Su Bei's military strength was indeed inferior. Everyone knew that once Su Bei fell, Jiang Pengji's next target would be Huang Song. The two of them had a mutually dependent relationship. No matter what schemes Huang Song had in mind, he couldn't remain indifferent. Huang Song quickly replied and formed an alliance in private. To express his sincerity, Huang Song even sent a very special woman to Su Bei. Su Bei was speechless. Did he seem like such a lecherous person? Su Bei was born in the Su family. What kind of woman couldn't he get? Why did he have to play with a married woman? Yes, Huang Song had sent him a woman who had turned over a new leaf. This woman had married 4 husbands and caused the death of 4 of them. When Su Bei heard about this, he was so angry that he almost exploded. Was Huang Song trying to form an alliance, or was he playing a prank on him? Until he read Huang Song's reply. Is this true? Su Bei furrowed his brows. Can we really use this woman to drive a wedge between Yang Si and Lu Shi? The skinny woman knelt on the ground. Beside her knelt a thin and weak little boy. According to Huang Song's letter, this woman had a history with Yang Si. The little boy beside her was Yang Si's only child. In the Battle of Tsang Prefecture, Jiang Pengji and Huang Song had peacefully divided the 2 counties of Tsang Prefecture and Chenzhou. The 2 counties of Tsang Prefecture belonged to Jiang Pengji, while Chenzhou belonged to Huang Song. Chenzhou happened to be Yang Si's hometown. Not long ago, this woman had been arrested by her neighbors and sent to the magistrate's office for killing her husband. According to the law, she should have been beheaded in public. However, she mentioned Yang Si, and this case was handed over to Huang Song. After a round of investigation and interrogation, the woman confessed that she and Yang Si had a past when they were young. Huang Song had been tricked by Yang Si so many times that he hated him to the core. When he heard the woman's words, he immediately paid attention and sent people to investigate. Yang Si's hometown was in Chenzhou's Jiangding County. This matched the woman's testimony. What they found later also matched the woman's testimony. This woman had killed her 4th husband because he had beaten her son. Huang Song's intuition told him that he could make a fuss about this. However, he didn't dare to agree with Yang Si's taste. Yang Si was the son of a prostitute, yet he had impregnated another prostitute and had given birth to a son. He, Huang Song said to the woman, I heard that Jing Rong is still unmarried and has a very pitiful life. He will definitely bring you and your daughter back and treat you well. The woman shrunk her shoulders and hung her head low. She looked timid, but when she heard Huang Song's words, her eyes lit up. Her eyes were filled with greed. Huang Song was very satisfied. He handed the woman and the child over to Su Bei's messenger. How Su Bei operated was none of his business. Yang Si used his own experience to illustrate a saying. A man sits in his tent, and a pot falls from the sky. When the 2 armies started the war, they first probed the enemy on a small scale. Jiang Pengji ordered Qin Gong and Yang Si to lead 20,000 troops to Longshui in Shanghai County. This was the place where Sichuan Plain and Shanwing Town bordered each other. They would hold back a portion of Su Bei's troops. Another 30,000 troops were dispatched to launch a probing attack on Zhe County to find out the enemy's strength. The remaining troops were to stay behind and wait for the situation to change. Chapter 1155. I'm afraid it's a Hongmen banquet. Qin Gong also read the contents of the invitation and subconsciously furrowed his brows. When the 2 armies were at war, if Yang Si got close to the enemy, it would arouse the suspicions of the higher-ups. Such a simple and crude method of sowing discord seemed simple and crude, but it often achieved unexpected results. Unfortunately, his lord was not a fool. She would never be led by the nose by others. If she had such an idea, she would be really stupid. Yang Si closed the invitation and sneered. So what if it's a Hongmen banquet? I'm just a small military advisor. I can't control the situation. If it really was a Hongmen banquet, it should be directed at the Lord. Yang Si was making a mountain out of a molehill. Qin Gong choked and said hesitantly, but the Lord's eyes are clear and her heart is clear. Ordinary tricks won't work on her. I'm a little curious. Why did Su Bei and his gang suddenly do this? Yang Si was not worried at all. He had followed Jiang Pengji for many years. He still had this bit of trust. I want to go and take a look. When Qin Gong heard this, he slowly swallowed his words of persuasion. Since the military advisor knew what to do, he was relieved. However, before the military advisor goes, why don't you inform the Lord first? If you go without permission, I'm afraid they'll use this to make a fuss. Qin Gong was very young, but with Su Fei as his former master, he was also trained to be cautious. He felt more stable than Xueqi. After Xueqi heard this, he pursed his lips and laughed. He gently knocked the rolled invitation on the table, making a melodious sound. Officer Qin's words make sense. Xueqi considered himself a nobody, but he had attracted a lot of hatred. There was no guarantee that someone would take the opportunity to harm him. For this hangmen banquet, he had to bring some people along to boost his courage and add some bargaining chips to his life. There were still 2 days before the banquet. Xueqi mentioned this matter to Zhang Pengji, and she rolled her eyes at him. "Aren't you afraid that they'll poison you to death during the banquet?" Zhang Pengji frowned at her family's advisor. She felt that her family was poisonous. Apart from a few simple and honest generals, the few civil officials were basically restless. Feng Jin, Wei Ci, and the rest were fine. After all, they were from an aristocratic family and had gentle personalities. However, Feng Zhen and Xueqi were different. Xueqi said, "When 2 armies cross swords, they do not kill the envoys." Xueqi wasn't a feudal lord. He was merely a strategist serving under a feudal lord. He wasn't worthy of Su Bei breaking this iron rule. Zhang Pengji said, "Since you're not afraid of death, why did you come to me for help?" Xueqi said straightforwardly, "Isn't this just in case? Take Han Yu for example. If this feast at Hongmen was set up by Han Yu, Xueqi felt that his life would be in danger. Seeing that Xueqi was eager to try, Zhang Pengji relented. "All right, I'll send a few people to follow you." Not only did Zhang Pengji think that Xueqi was eager to court death, but the idle onlookers could also tell. "Fudi Yang Jingrong. Every day, I'm on the brink of death. Zigongjiang Pengji, if you court death again, I'll break your legs." The audience even photoshopped a gif of a white crane with a broken leg and crutches extending its leg at the edge of the circle. The words "courting death" were written on the circle, and "Xueqi" was written on the white crane's head. Zhang Pengji watched as the white crane extended its leg again and again, only to have its leg broken by the washboard again and again. She held in her laughter. The idle onlookers in the live stream room were quite talented. When Xueqi saw who the guard was, he was so scared that his whole body trembled. His nerves were stretched taut. Why did the Lord let Officer Zhang come? Zhang Nongqin lowered her eyelids and said, "The Lord asked me to follow the military counselor to broaden my horizons and protect his safety." Xueqi was speechless. It was just a feast at Hongmen. What could she broaden her horizons? "I'm a woman. When ordinary people see women, they'll always lower their vigilance. It'll be more convenient for them to act." Zhang Nongqin did not wear armor. She changed into a plain female dress, which was rare. She pretended to be Xueqi's maid. Her facial features were not very outstanding. Because she had a cold face all year round, her eyebrows and eyes looked very cold and hard. She was not as gentle and beautiful as ordinary women. Even if she was wearing a female dress, she still gave people the illusion that she was carrying a broadsword to hack people anytime and anywhere. She was indeed half a disciple taught by the Lord. Obviously, Officer Zhang's words don't include you and the Lord. Xueqi secretly looked away. He was afraid that it would hurt his eyes if he looked too much. For other women, appearance was very important. If they looked mediocre, they would not be able to be found in a crowd. However, the person in front of him was different. Her aura was like a searchlight, so bright that it was blinding. Zhang Nongqin frowned and corrected him honestly. "It's the Lord and me." Even someone as smart as Xueqi was confused by Zhang Nongqin. "It's indeed you and the Lord?" Zhang Nongqin asked with a cold face. "How can I be before the Lord?" "It's disrespectful." Xueqi was speechless. It was hopeless. Because it was near the battlefield, almost half of the people of Longshui had escaped. The rest were either old, weak, or sick. The population was sparse and the streets were cold. Only a certain mansion in the city was bustling with noise and excitement. It was brightly lit. One could hardly feel the smoke of war in it. Xueqi arrived on time for the banquet. The other party treated him as a distinguished guest and prepared a feast of good wine and dishes. There were even beauties dancing during the banquet to liven things up. They toasted each other and chatted happily. The dancers' clothes were thin and translucent. Their hair was decorated with pearls. As they danced and collided with each other, they made a crisp sound. Their feet were fair and their legs were slender. Their skin revealed a clear texture under the illumination of the orange lights. At first, Xueqi was tense, but as the banquet began, he relaxed. There was a smile at the corner of his mouth, but his eyes were cold. "Is there anyone you like, Mr. Yang?" After the dance ended, the middle-aged man sitting at the head of the table asked Xueqi. Xueqi said, "The dance is good and the person is a beauty." The middle-aged man laughed heartily and pointed at the leading lady to make tea and serve wine to Xueqi. Xueqi asked, "Let's not beat around the bush. There must be a reason for General Zhao's hospitality, right?" The middle-aged man's surname was Zhao, and his name was Xiao. He was originally a famous scholar in Zhangzhou's East Gate County. Now that he was seeking shelter under Su Pei's camp, he even got the title of a surplus general that was neither high nor low. The title sounded good, but in reality, he did not have military power. It was rather like being pampered. Zhao Xiao said, "What reason?" "I just heard of your deeds and secretly admired you, so I wanted to meet you." Xueqi's expression did not change, but his heart sank. He was not a 3-year-old child. Why would he believe Zhao Xiao's words? Zhao Xiao's name sounded unfamiliar, but no one dared to underestimate what he had done. Years ago, Yang Jian went to the Xueqi conference as a vassal of Dongqing. During the conference, he performed well and caused Prince Changshu to suffer. He became a dark horse at that time. After the conference, Yang Jian's reputation soared and he gained many benefits from the conference. Yang Jian originally wanted to unite the aristocratic families of Dongmen Commandery to fight against the fake Prince Changshu. However, he did not expect Zhao Xiao to be sinister. Afraid that Yang Jian would bring up old scores, he made a move first and poisoned him. The grudge between Yang Jian and Zhao Xiao went back more than 20 years. It was just a small matter. Zhao Xiao had a milk brother who relied on Zhao Xiao's power to bully the villagers. In the end, he was killed by the young and aggressive Yang Jian. The two became enemies because of this. The milk brother was, to put it bluntly, the son of a wet nurse. He was a slave who had nothing to do with Zhao Xiao. This slave also relied on his master's power to bully others everywhere, ruining his master's reputation. He deserved to die. Because of this grudge, Zhao Xiao bore it for more than 20 years. In the end, he took the risk and poisoned Yang Jian to death. Yang Jian was tortured by the poisoned wine for an entire night before he died in agony. It was clear how dark and narrow-minded this person was. After that, with the rise of Yang Jian's son, Yang Tao, Zhao Xiao fled to Nanxing with the fake emperor out of fear of death. Unexpectedly, under the planning of Yan Lin, Yang Tao's strategist, Zhao Xiao set his sights on Nanxing's territory. Helpless, Zhao Xiao could only pack his bags and flee back. Coincidentally, Su Bei took the opportunity to swallow up half of Zhangzhou. Zhao Xiao used his status as an aristocratic family to seek refuge with Su Bei and became a surplus general. This guy said that he admired Xueqi, so he held a banquet to entertain him. Even a pig wouldn't believe this. Xueqi responded carefully. Zhao Xiao continued to summon singers and dancers to liven things up. There were also other aristocratic families at the banquet to liven up the atmosphere. One after another, they urged him to drink. Xueqi could not refuse and could only drink. His alcohol tolerance was decent. Nowadays, winemaking techniques were not good, and the alcohol content was not high. Hence, Xueqi did not get drunk. When the banquet ended, the night was already as dark as ink. Jiang Nongqin, who was disguised as a servant, helped him back to the sleeping quarters prepared by Zhao Xiao. This Zhao Xiao. I wonder what he's up to. Jiang Nongqin frowned. Since the banquet started, she had been waiting outside. Although she did not see the scene at the banquet with her own eyes, with her excellent eyesight and hearing, she could imagine most of it in her head. Xueqi lowered his voice and said, "You'll know in a while." Even if he did not mention it during the banquet, he would definitely reveal it after the banquet. However, Xueqi never expected that Zhao Xiao would prepare such a big gift for him. "There's someone in the room." Before she got close, Jiang Nongqin had already sensed the presence of a stranger in the room. Xueqi pursed his lips. Could it be a honey trap? Jiang Nongqin closed her eyes and said coldly, "Throwing a meat bun at a dog is a one-way trip. A honey trap is really stupid." Xueqi was speechless. "Field Officer Jiang, you've gone too far." In order to save face, Xueqi said again, "Maybe it's an assassination?" Jiang Nongqin said in surprise. If it's an assassination, wouldn't it be faster to poison him during the banquet? Yang Si was eating happily. He did not refuse any good wine and delicacies, and he was served by a beauty in his arms. He would be a romantic even if he was a ghost. Yang Si was speechless. In order to avoid the awkward conversation, Yang Si pushed open the door of the sleeping quarters. The room was lit by candlelight, and a graceful woman was sitting at the table. A honey trap. Chapter 1156. Why are you here? At this moment, Yang Si did not feel the slightest joy of meeting an old friend in a foreign land. Instead, there was a chilling killing intent in his eyes. The woman knelt on the mat and bowed deeply to Yang Si with her thin back. She clasped the mat with both hands and did not say a word. Answer! Not only did Yang Si's face turn cold, but his voice also became cold. Why did they look for you? To deal with me? The last 3 words were full of sarcasm and contempt. Not talking. Seeing that she was pretending to be dead, Yang Si was furious and wanted to leave. Seeing that he really turned around, the woman hurriedly knelt and hugged his legs, sobbing softly. Don't go. If you leave, both my son and I will die. Yang Si tried to pull his legs out, but the woman hugged him tightly. He could not move at all and could not break free. Lieutenant Jiang, help! Yang Si tried his best but still failed. He could only shout angrily outside the room. The woman who was hugging his legs was stunned. She saw a maid dressed in plain clothes walk in from outside the door. The maid didn't even look at Yang Si. She raised her hand and grabbed the back of the woman's collar, lifting her up. You want to shout for help for such a woman? Military advisor Yang. Do you really not need to see the doctor? He did not eat the meat bun that was sent to him, and his legs were trapped by the meat bun and could not break free. Jiang Nongqin felt that she was out of touch with the whole world. Was a man so thin and weak? She looked down and Yang Si subconsciously took a few steps back. When he understood the meaning of her words, his already ugly face darkened. You two know each other? Seeing that Yang Si did not speak, Jiang Nongqin glanced at the woman who was thrown aside with tears on her cheeks. Yang Si said, more than that. Oh, Jiang Nongqin said. Thinking of Yang Si's usual style, she asked, do we couple? Was it a love debt? Yang Si was speechless. He really could not afford to offend women. His previous style was indeed not good, but in Jiang Nongqin's eyes, was it so bad? The woman was a little hurt from the fall, but she did not dare to move closer to Yang Si. Instead, she looked at Jiang Nongqin with a critical gaze. She had been in brothels for more than 10 years, and her eyes were very sharp. She could tell at a glance that Jiang Nongqin, who was still dressed as an unmarried woman, was not a virgin. Jiang Nongqin immediately felt the hostility in the woman's eyes. Jealousy, hatred, contempt, disgust. Wasn't it just a fall? Was there such a big grudge? This is the main course of the Hongmen banquet? Jiang Nongqin raised her eyebrows as she asked Yang Si. Su Bei had gone through so much trouble to invite Yang Si to a banquet. She had thought that it was a honey trap and a plan to sow discord between Yang Si and the Lord. She did not expect that he would actually send a 27 or 28-year-old woman. At this age, she could be preparing to be a mother-in-law, right? Yang Si said snappily, I guess so. The woman in front of him had witnessed the worst part of Yang Si's past. Now that he had been caught red-handed by Jiang Nongqin, he felt uncomfortable all over. The woman asked, Who are you? Jiang Nongqin sneered in response. She did not want to answer. This woman's background was unknown. How could she be qualified to question her? She casually found a place to sit so that Yang Si wouldn't ask her for help later. When Yang Si saw that she refused to leave, he felt even more embarrassed. He only wanted to end the battle quickly and settle the matter as soon as possible. Tell me, why are you here? The woman was frozen by his coldness. Her shoulders shivered and she bit her lower lip. She did not have much contact with Yang Si, but she knew that he had a ruthless temperament. I heard that you've won the favor of a noble and that you're now on a meteoric rise. I don't ask for anything else. I only ask that you do a good deed and save me and fourth son. As long as you ask for it, we can be saved. Yang Si sneered. On what basis? On. The woman thought about it and gritted her teeth. On what sister said before she died. Yang Xi's eyes were filled with murderous intent, but he wore a smile on his face. He asked, "You have the cheek to mention them? I've already done my part by redeeming you from the brothel before I left Jiangding County. Now that you've appeared here, you must be up to no good. How can you have the cheek to ask for it?" Jiang Nongqin, who was watching from the side, acted as a spectator and watched the drama that was filled with gratitude and hatred. The woman said with tears in her eyes, "I'm just a weak woman. If I didn't do this, I would have been skinned and died without a complete corpse." Yang Xi did not want to listen to this person's lies. The woman continued, "I lied to those people and said that fourth son is your flesh and blood. Then they captured him. If you're not willing to help, we really can't live. Yang Jingrong, can you help us for the sake of Dean Yang and the others?" Yang Xi was so angry that he almost had a heart attack. Although he had a romantic life like Feng Longzi, he had never thought that he would be a father. The woman repeated the two sentences over and over again. When Yang Xi redeemed her from the brothel, she turned over a new leaf and married a man. However, that honest man had a short life. He died not long after, leaving her and the 3-month-old child in her womb. Her mother-in-law had always held a grudge against her past and suspected that she was a posthumous child. She cruelly drove her out of the house. Later, she remarried to another man, who also died not long after. The third man lived a little longer. She thought that her life was stable, but she did not expect that her husband would be captured to do forced labor and die. Life was really hard for a woman with a child. There was chaos outside, so she could only marry again. The fourth man was an idle gambler. When he had no money, he beat her and her son. He even scolded her that she could not have a child after a few years of marriage because she had served too many men in the past. After that, the family was so poor that they could not live on anymore. He actually planned to let her resume her old job and make her son a servant to serve other men. In a rage, she picked up the firewood knife at home and chopped the man to death. The neighbors seized her and sent her to the magistrate's office. In order to survive, she could only mention Yang Xi. She did not know anything else, but she knew that Yang Xi had met a benefactor and became a superior person. She might be able to survive if she had a relationship with him. Does the military counselor have a son who was left outside? Jiang Nongqin could not help but ask. Logically, Jiang Nongqin felt that the possibility was very high. After all, Yang Xi and Feng Zhan were jackals of the same tribe. However, Yang Xi said, "There's no such thing. Don't taint my innocence." "But I see that you two are quite close." Yang Xi brushed it off. "We just met when we were young. Just now she said that she lied to others that sea air is your flesh and blood. Could it be that those people want to use a fake son, wife and child to threaten you? However, Su Bei and the others are not stupid. If you have nothing to do with this woman, they won't believe her words so easily, right?" Yang Xi really had no way to refute. That alone doesn't seem to be enough to threaten anything. Jiang Nongqin was puzzled. Yang Xi said, "She used to be a prostitute." Jiang Nongqin instantly understood. Everyone knew about Yang Xi's background. If he had a son with a prostitute and then abandoned them, he would be laughed at for the rest of his life. He could not choose his parents, but he did the same thing as his father. What did this mean? It meant that this thing could be inherited. The son of a prostitute would not be presentable in the end. Yang Xi said again, her son was also detained. If war breaks out, the child will be sacrificed to the flag. Jiang Nongqin's expression darkened. If that was really the case, Yang Xi's life would be over. The enemy could use this as leverage to secretly instigate Yang Xi to defect. Of course, all of this had to be based on the fact that it was true. "You really have nothing to do with this woman?" "I know her, but there is no relationship. That child has nothing to do with me." Yang Xi sighed and said, "She has 2 older sisters. The eldest sister is older than me, and the second sister is the same age as me. Their house is next to the thatched cottage where I study. Her eldest sister is called Zhaonyang, and the second sister is the Dean Yang that I mentioned just now. Although Dean Yang is a woman, she is born intelligent and eager to learn. She can learn almost anything with just a little." As the eldest sister, Zhaonyang doted on her younger sister. She knew that her second sister was attracted by the neighbor's reading, and she wanted to learn how to read too. Thus, she shamelessly went to ask for help. At first, Yang Xi did not agree. How could an ignorant girl want to learn how to read? Later, he softened and agreed because Dean Young's talent was beyond his imagination. This made Yang-si want to be serious. After more than a year, Yang-si became familiar with the neighbor. He and Dean Young were the same age, and they seemed to be childhood friends. However, their father was not a good person. When he was young, he owed a lot of gambling debts and was forced to flee to another place. Dean Young's mother was willing to sell herself to the brothel so that her 3 daughters wouldn't be caught by the debt collectors. She worked hard for many years and got sick. After she died, she didn't even have a coffin. She was buried on the ground with a mat. When Dean Young's father heard that the debt had been paid, he gathered his courage and came back. This bad person didn't learn his lesson. He hid in another place and gambled indiscriminately. When he came back, he wanted to sell the 3 sisters to the brothel. As mentioned before, Master Yuan Jing had picked up Yang-si. Although he didn't bring him back to Langi to be raised, he gave a sum of money to the farmer who adopted him and asked them to take care of him. Before Yang-si was enlightened, he came to visit him every 6 months. After Yang-si was enlightened, he came to visit him every 3 months. When Dean Yang and her sisters were sold to the brothel by their father for money, Yang-si followed Master Yuan Jing to study and learn how to write. When Master Yuan Jing came back, he found out what had happened. Yang-si went to the brothel. The 15-year-old Zhaonyang had already combed herself up in a hurry and became a prostitute. Because she had a good foundation and a clean temperament, she became popular for a while. The 2 younger sisters escaped the disaster because they were young. They stayed in the brothel as maids. If he wanted to bring Zhaonyang out of the brothel, he had to spend money to redeem her or run away. Yang-si had no money, so he could only choose the latter. At that time, Yang-si was still very young, but his wisdom was no less than that of an ordinary teenager. Zhaonyang didn't want to be a prostitute for the rest of her life. She didn't want her 2 younger sisters to follow in her footsteps, so she agreed to my plan. There were many thugs in the brothel, but it wasn't difficult to lure them away. Zhaonyang wasn't a top courtesan, and there weren't many people watching her, so she escaped quite smoothly. Unexpectedly. As he spoke, Yang-si glanced coldly at the woman who was trembling and didn't say a word. She was stupid. She only saw that the brothel had food, drinks and clothes to wear, so she didn't want to leave. Before she escaped, she hid and even sold her 2 older sisters in the end. The brothel was a very cruel place. If the girls who ran away were caught, how could they have a good ending? Zhaonyang knew that their whereabouts had been leaked. Once they were caught, they might still be alive, but Yang-si would definitely be beaten to death. Zhaonyang hid Yang-si in the cellar, and they were also caught by more than 20 thugs from the brothel who came later. Their ending was very tragic. Yang-si hid in the dark cellar, listening to the movements coming from above. The darkness and cramped space of the cellar almost drove him crazy. He wanted to climb out of the cellar countless times, but in the end, he restrained himself. He had never hated himself so much for being so weak. Whether it was Zhaonyang, who was 15 years old, or Dean Yang, who had just turned 10, how could they survive when faced with more than 20 wild men? In the beginning, they struggled to survive, but in the end, they were on the verge of death. When Yang-si came out of the cellar, he saw a scene of devastation. Zhaonyang didn't hate him. Instead, she begged him to take care of her 3rd younger sister if he had the ability. Dean Yang's body was green and black. Before she died, she murmured, "It hurts." This incident also changed Yang-si's temperament, and he grew up quickly overnight. Yang-si buried the 2 sisters and hid for a while. Later, he found out who had betrayed their whereabouts. It was my naivety that killed them. If it weren't for me, they might have had a hard time in the brothel, but at least they would still be alive. I'm sorry, but this person is also an accomplice. Yang-si pointed at the woman sitting paralyzed on the ground. I wanted to raise money to redeem her from the brothel before she got married, but she was very stupid. She believed the flowery words of some rich man and willingly became a concubine. Not long after, because of her flamboyant temperament, she was beaten by the legal wife and sold back to the brothel. I came to her and said that I wanted to redeem her, but she said that I could redeem her, but she wanted me to marry her as the legal wife. She made things difficult for me, so I refused. Yang-si was still brooding over the betrayal of the woman. Since she was so eager to die, he simply pretended to be deaf and dumb and watched her flop in the brothel alone. When the world was in chaos, Yang-si thought about going out to explore. Before he left, he asked his errand boy to redeem the woman from the brothel with money. After that, he didn't know what happened. When they met again, the other party actually wanted him to be a father. After Jiang Nongqin heard this, she was speechless for a long time. No matter what Su Bei was planning, he couldn't have used this woman and her child to threaten me. Yang Si said coldly, although I'm dissolute in private, I don't want just anyone. At least, I don't want to touch even half a finger of this person. The woman said timidly, I was still young then, I didn't understand at all. Yang Si snorted coldly, you were young, but you betrayed your sister with a clear mind and a glib tongue. The woman continued, although I was wrong, you also said that my sister didn't blame me. Yang Si sneered, that's why you could escape from the brothel and not die under the hands of some man. The woman revealed a look of despair. Yang Jingrong, how could you be so cruel? How could you bear to watch the only child of the three of us die here? Of course I could bear to. In the future, I'll find 2 good adopted sons for them and put them under their names. The young Yang Si had been affected by that incident, causing him to be depressed and on the verge of a breakdown. But now, he was able to take it lightly. Or perhaps, it could be said that he had seen many people who were even more miserable than this and had long developed a heart of stone. Jiang Nongqin frowned and said, even if you have nothing to do with her, if Su Bei were to blame you and use the mother and son as a reason to criticize you. Yang Si's situation was worrying. Chapter 1157. The woman no longer looked dispirited. Her facial features contorted in agitation. Yang Jingrong, how can you slander Si-er's bloodline? The woman was so agitated that her chest rose and fell violently. Her hands trembled uncontrollably. She said, his father and I went through a formal wedding ceremony. He's not the bloodline of a benefactor, nor is he the son of a prostitute. I was young and ignorant in the past. That's why I made such a huge mistake. Now that I want to turn over a new leaf, why are you still so aggressive? She was only 6 or 7 years old then. How would she know what a prostitute meant? She only knew that she could eat and drink in a brothel. Wasn't this life much better than being penniless in the past? Yang Si said that she betrayed her sister, but she really didn't know that there would be such serious consequences. She only wanted her sister to come back and enjoy life with her. The woman couldn't help but find excuses to lessen her guilt. Did I stop you when you wanted to turn over a new leaf? Yang Si snorted coldly and looked at her coldly. You shouldn't have bitten people for no reason. Tell me, why should I risk my own safety to save you and your son? Do you really think this is so simple? That it'll be over just like how you served your benefactor in the past? How dare you get involved in a battle between dukes? The woman lowered her head and trembled in fear. Her skinny body trembled like a sieve, making one feel pity for her. Jiang Nongqin pulled out a dagger from her waist and blew on the blade, making the shiny blade even colder. Military advisor Yang. This woman is quite an eyesore. I'm afraid she'll cause trouble. Why don't? She turned her wrist and twirled the dagger in her hand. It was so nimble that it seemed to be a part of her body. It sent chills down one's spine. The woman was so frightened that her face turned pale. Her skinny body leaned back. You can't kill me. She lost her sense of propriety after being frightened. Why would Su Bei and the rest think that she can seduce you? Jiang Nongqin sneered. Honey trap? Why doesn't she look in the mirror and have an idea? It's not enough to just have a face and a body. She has to be intelligent and fearless in the face of danger. Yang Si said, you can't ask for too much. If she could do what you said, she wouldn't have ended up like this. Jiang Nongqin asked, how do you plan to deal with her? Killing people was definitely out of the question. Firstly, Yang Si might not be willing to do it. Secondly, killing people would be suspected of having a guilty conscience, which would instead give the enemy something to use against him. Yang Si spoke as the woman waited anxiously. Let her fend for herself. I don't want to dirty my hands. Once Su Bei found out that the woman had lied to him, he would not show any mercy. The woman became more and more flustered. He had been stabbed several times, but he had to grit his teeth and admit that the other party had stabbed him well. Yes. Whatever the little fairy said was right. Yang Si came to the banquet out of curiosity. He did not expect to be fed a mouthful of *tea. He even had a belly full of anger. Let's go home. Zhao Xiao soon received the news and hurriedly brought people over. Could it be that the beauty arranged is not to your liking, sir? Yang Si said, not only is it not to my liking, but it's also extremely nauseating. Zhao Xiao secretly observed his expression and was puzzled. Yang Si's reaction was very different from what he had imagined. The servants did not treat you well and neglected you. I'll go and give them a warning now. Zhao Xiao persuaded earnestly. It's getting late now. Why don't you stay for the night so that I can be a good host? I wonder how that beauty offended you. Yang Si said, that person tried to claim friendship as soon as she came up. Her motive is suspicious. Si has seen her before. She used to be a flower lady in Jiangding County. There were countless people around her. General Zhao gave her away. Is he trying to befriend her or is he trying to pick a fight? Si wanted to ask General Zhao what he meant by this. This woman even said with certainty that she had Si's flesh and blood. Ha, what a joke. She's just a prostitute. Who knows whose flesh and blood is in her belly? What's more, there's nothing between Si and her. General Zhao comes from a prestigious family. Your family is upright and upright. You definitely won't let Si be slandered by such a woman, right? Zhao Xiao looked embarrassed and said, that woman took the initiative to come to me to make a statement. I saw that she had irrefutable evidence and believed her words. I had the intention of reuniting Mr. Yang with the mother and son. Who would have thought that my good intentions would cause trouble? Yang Si sneered, if General Zhao doesn't believe me, you can check Sier's birth date and the time when Si left Jiangding County. There's a gap of 3 to 5 months. Prostitutes are best at sweet words and sowing discord. General Zhao actually believed them? Zhao Xiao's face turned green and white. Mr. Yang is right. The words of prostitutes cannot be trusted. After all, dirty blood flows in their bones. No matter what, it's not something that can be put on the table. Don't be angry, Mr. Yang. I'll send people to deal with the mother and son right now to restore Mr. Yang's reputation. Chapter 1158. Zhao Xiao seemed to have realized Yang Si's abnormality. He suddenly patted his forehead and smiled apologetically at him. Mr. Yang, I didn't mean to target you with those words just now. Please don't take it to heart. Zhao Xiao hated Yang Si very much. It was not that Yang Si had offended him. In fact, it was his first time meeting Yang Si. He had only heard of his name before. However, Yang Si was born in a lowly family. He was the son of a prostitute. Who knew who his father was? To put it bluntly, any man could sleep with Yang Si's mother with a little money. Wasn't that disgusting? Zhao Xiao even thought that if Yang Si's mother was still alive and he gave her some money to serve another man in front of her son, would she do it? As a son, would Yang Si commit suicide out of shame and anger? Hee, how humiliating and mocking would that be? The blood flowing in Yang Si's bones was the original sin. He was just the son of a prostitute. Instead of staying in a brothel and being a pimp to be ordered around, he dressed like a scholar and came out to be an eyesore. Every time Zhao Xiao thought about it, he felt extremely disgusted. What right did he have to be treated as a guest of honor and drink with him? Being in the same room, Zhao Xiao disliked Yang Si for dirtying the air. Suppressing this disgust, Zhao Xiao used the mother and son as a raft to humiliate Yang Si indirectly. He suddenly felt carefree. Yang Si was still indifferent. However, Jiang Nongqin, who was not far away, felt her hands itching. She wanted to put her hand on the dagger at her waist several times. It's okay. Yang Si looked calm and said with a smile, I just heard someone's words and felt that they made sense. Since there is no way back, you have to move forward even if you have to kneel. This is the general principle. This is the sin that I've committed with my own hands. I have to swallow this bitter fruit even if I cry. Zhao Xiao thought about it and suddenly realized that Yang Si was also mocking him. What do you mean, Mr. Yang? He pretended not to know. I heard that when General Zhao was young, you had some disagreements with the late commandant of Dongmen County, Yang Jian. Yang Si had a faint smile on his face as he coldly observed Zhao Xiao's unnatural expression. I heard that Commandant Yang Jian didn't die of a sudden illness. Instead, he fell into the evil trap of a villain and unfortunately died in his prime. Commandant Yang Jian had a great reputation in Zhangzhou, and my master even had an alliance with him. When he was suddenly informed of his death, he was saddened for a long time, and he said that the world lost another loyal and valiant general. The Buddha speaks of karma. That villain who poisoned me should die a horrible death, right? Zhao Xiao's face was livid, and his eyes were wide open from hatred and killing intent, almost to the point of splitting. Yongxi's eyes were slightly closed, and he still looked calm and collected. It was a pain in the ass. Fortunately, although Commandant Yang Jian is dead, his legacy has not been lost. His only son, Yang Tao, was now an outstanding talent. He was so filial to his late father. How could he easily let go of the enemy who killed his father? When his wings are full and he catches the villain who poisoned him. Yongxi glanced at Zhao Xiao and sneered. The hatred of his father's killer is absolutely irreconcilable. Cutting him into 1,000 pieces or flaying him to light a lamp won't be enough to vent his anger. Cutting him into 1,000 pieces was easy to understand, but what was flaying him to light a lamp? Rumor had it that during the troubled times of the 16 kingdoms, there was a small country called Jing. This, flaying him to light a lamp, was a punishment specially invented by the last emperor of Jing Kingdom to amuse his favorite concubine. A long cut was made on the human skin from head to toe, and mercury was poured into it. The prisoner was in unbearable pain, and his skin would break out. In this way, a complete human skin could be removed, and the remaining bloody and skinless body would be squeezed out of the human fat. The prisoner who had lost his human skin would be tied up, and the layer of fat on his abdomen would be dug out, and a lamp would be lit. Just the thought of the scene sent chills down one's spine. Zhao Xiao looked at Yongxi with anger, shock, and fear. He was pointing at the mulberry tree and cursing the locust tree in front of Yongxi, so Yongxi simply exposed him and threatened him. Zhao Xiao suppressed his fear and cursed in his heart. The son of a lowly prostitute. There are still many government affairs to settle in the military camp. It's not good for me to stay outside for too long to avoid delaying official business. I'll take my leave first. Yongxi declined Zhao Xiao's invitation to stay expressionlessly. The two of them hated each other. What else could they do if they stayed behind other than to hurt each other? Zhao Xiao had no choice but to let them go. Jiang Nongqin boarded the horse carriage and looked at Yongxi, who was sitting in the carriage with his eyes closed. She lifted the curtain and glanced at Long Xue. Will Zhao Xiao, that old fellow, send someone to kill us? Jiang Nongqin was in a bad mood and wanted to find a few people to vent her anger on. Killing the enemy was the best way. It's hard to say. He wants to settle things once and for all, but he can't get past Su Bei. Su Bei was a person who wanted to save face and suffered. He was always acting like an aristocratic family, so it was impossible for him to lower his status and ambush Yongxi. Jiang Nongqin said, I shouldn't have come today. I didn't get any useful information, and instead, I suffered a belly full of anger. She really wanted to twist Zhao Xiao's head off and kick it like a ball. Yongxi glanced at Jiang Nongqin from the corner of his eyes and laughed. What's Field Officer Jiang angry about? Jiang Nongqin raised her eyebrows and asked, Military Advisor Yang, aren't you angry at all? Humans have 7 emotions and 6 desires. Yongxi is just an ordinary person. How can he be immune? It's impossible for him not to be angry. But what can he do even if he's angry? Yongxi sneered, a cold glint flashing in his eyes. Saints also say that when heaven is about to bestow a great responsibility on a man, he must first suffer his will, tire his muscles and bones, starve his skin, and empty his body. So what if he's arrogant? The one who stands at the end is the winner. So what if he's the son of a prostitute? One day, I'll make these people bend their knees and bend their waists, lower their heads, and break their proud and unyielding character. As she spoke, Jiang Nongqin saw Yongxi gripping the corner of the table so tightly that his fingers almost dug into the table. Some people became more and more timid when faced with the malice and attacks of the entire world, until they lost the courage to live. However, Yongxi was different. The more others slandered him, humiliated him, mocked him, belittled him, despised him, and hated him, the more he wanted to live freely. His weakness could not be exchanged for the sympathy and pity of others. It would only become a weakness that his enemies could use to ridicule and belittle him. In that situation just now, if the military counselor had given the order, I would have definitely taken the head of the old thief Zhao Xiao. In Jiang Nongqin's opinion, these weak scholars were all treasures, little princesses that needed to be pampered and pampered. Yongxi said, No, we can't do that. Zhao Xiao is still useful. Jiang Nongqin was surprised. What's the use of that old thief? Yang Tao has been expanding his power in Nanxing. Now, he has become an opponent that can't be ignored. Jiang Nongqin thought about it and asked, "Do you mean to sell Zhao Shao to Yang Tao as a personal favor?" "Although it's not right, I've guessed some things." Yang Xi's fingers tapped on the table. The carriage was swaying, and it was so quiet outside that only the sound of the wheels could be heard. How can Field Officer Jiang not find it strange? That woman is Huan Yang from Jiangding County in Chenzhou, which is far away from Shanghai County and Zhe County. Jiang Nongqin was stunned. She really didn't think of this. Chenzhou is Huang Song's territory. According to that woman, she killed her husband with her own hands and was facing the death penalty. In order to survive, she indiscriminately accused me. If that's the case, do you think it's possible that the woman ended up in Su Bei's hands without going through Huang Song? Yang Xi said, "The only possibility is that this woman was sent to Su Bei by Huang Song." In other words, Huang Song and Su Bei may have formed an alliance in private. If they didn't have this layer of alliance, Huang Song could have kept this trump card and used it at the right time to ruthlessly defeat Yang Xi. Even if that mother and son had nothing to do with Yang Xi, Yang Xi's reputation would be completely ruined. Refuting rumors would never catch up with spreading rumors. Therefore, Yang Xi could basically conclude that the two troublemakers, Huang Song and Su Bei, were in cahoots. Jiang Nongqin's mind was in a mess. If not for Yang Xi's reminder, she wouldn't have realized it at all. "What does this have to do with Zhao Shao?" Yang Xi said, "Yang Tao is a filial son. If he knew that Zhao Shao had already sneaked back to Dongqing and joined Su Bei's camp as a low-key surplus general, do you think Yang Tao could tolerate it? Su Bei has taken over half of Zhangzhou. Yang Tao has yet to settle this score with him." Yang Tao dug deep into Nanxing to search for Zhao Shao. He never expected that Zhao Shao would sneak back to Dongqing. Nowadays, communication technology was extremely backward. There were no cell phones, telephones, or the internet. One had to walk when they left home and shout when they made calls. An international letter would take more than half a year on the road. Zhao Shao sincerely wanted to hide from Yang Tao, but Yang Tao's attention was on Nanxing. Yang Tao really couldn't do anything to him. Su Bei and Huang Song are in cahoots. Why can't our Lord present Buddha with borrowed flowers and do Yang Tao a favor by outflanking Su Bei? Yang Xi's gaze was heavy. His eyes were filled with coldness. "Officer Jiang, I'm curious. How should this Zhao Shao die? Anyone who offended him could forget about getting on his good side." The sky had just turned bright when Yang Xi and the rest returned. They washed up a little and went to see Jiang Pengji. "You went over to have a meal and saved him?" Jiang Pengji teased. "Su Bei is really stingy. At least send a beauty to entertain him." "Yang Xi, please stop talking. Everything that happened yesterday was like a nightmare." His heart was in turmoil, but his face was calm and collected. Yang Xi briefly explained what happened last night. Then, he told her about his analysis of Jiang Nongqin. Yang Xi went out for a while. Once he returned, he formulated the next strategic route. They would form an alliance with Yang Tao and besiege Su Bei. Then, they would turn around and deal with Huang Song. After getting rid of Huang Song, they would either try to encroach on Zhongzhao's territory or backstab their new ally, Yang Tao. Jiang Pengji. Yang Xi was more skilled at killing acquaintances than she was. Jiang Pengji summoned the civil and military officials in her camp for a military meeting. Most of them voted in favor of Yang Xi's suggestion. If Su Bei and Huang Song formed an alliance, it wasn't that Jiang Pengji couldn't fight. It was just that the battle line would be stretched too far. If Huang Song was shameless and directly launched a sneak attack on the main camp in Wanzhou, Jiang Pengji's side would be very passive. If they formed an alliance with Yang Tao, they could set the battle line in the south and restrict the troops of Huang Song and the rest. Who is willing to seek an alliance with Nanxing? Taking the initiative to form an alliance required a sincere attitude. It was necessary to send a capable general. The Sichuan plain of Hu County was less than 10 days' journey from the border of Nanxing. It would take at least a month to find Yang Tao and talk about forming an alliance. However, they weren't clear about the situation in Nanxing. After a moment of silence, Wei Ci stepped forward and volunteered. "I am willing to resolve my lord's problems." Among the people in the camp, He was the most suitable. In his previous life, he had assisted in Xueqi in conquering half of Nanxing. He had spent a lot of effort on that. No one knew it better than him. Jiang Pengji frowned. After a while she asked, "Zi Xiao, are you confident?" 100%. Chapter 1159. Zi Xiao, please treat this trip to Nanxing with caution. After the crowd dispersed, Qiguanrang could not help but remind Wei Ci. Wei Ci turned his head upon hearing the voice. There was a hint of surprise in his eyes. He had a sharp nature. It was not like he was unaware of Qiguanrang's wariness and suspicion towards him. Aside from official business, they rarely interacted with each other in private, let alone this kind of advice to a friend. Qiguanrang raised his eyelids and said lightly, "The Lord's decision to form an alliance with Yang Tao was only to reduce the pressure on the battlefront." She wasn't afraid of the alliance between the Huang and Su families. Since they were going to fight anyway, it would be the same sooner or later. When you go to Nanxing, it's best if you can persuade Yang Tao. If you can't, it's fine too. At the end of the day, the war can be fought at any time. The difference lies in the length of time and the degree of difficulty. But there is only one Wei Ci in the world. On the surface, Wei Ci did not show any extreme reaction, but in his heart, he was somewhat fearful. Ever since Wei Ci had ascertained who was responsible for the meteorite falling from the sky in his past life, he did not expect to gain Qiguanrang's approval and trust. This was because the theory of rebirth was too absurd. Other than the Lord, no one else would believe it. Since Wei Ci could not be honest, he naturally could not completely dispel Qiguanrang's suspicions. "Wenjing, do you think there will be other changes during the trip to Nanxing?" Wei Ci pretended to be confused. "That's not it." Qiguanrang shook his head. "I'm just reminding you to be careful and protect yourself. Don't force yourself." If Wei Ci was just an ordinary strategist, it would be fine. However, he was a fat piece of meat that his lord had her eyes on. She could not let him be taken away by others. Of course, his concern for Wei Ci did not mean that he did not suspect him. Wei Ci accepted the other party's goodwill. However, "Sigh. I'm afraid the Lord is angry." From the time he volunteered to bring his men to Nanxing, Wei Ci had not found a chance to speak to Jiang Pengji. The two of them met in a public place, so there was no chance for them to talk alone. According to Wei Ci's understanding of her, it was highly likely that she was angry. However, if time could be reversed and he was given another chance to choose, Wei Ci would still step forward. Didn't he want to do his best to help her ascend the throne and create a better and more glorious situation than his previous life? If he couldn't make up for the regrets of his previous life, wouldn't his rebirth be meaningless? Wei Ci rode on the horse and looked back at the tents that were gradually getting further and further behind him, until the tents that were like mountains disappeared into the horizon. To ensure Wei Ci's safety, Jiang Pengji assigned many guards to him. His experience from his past life told Wei Ci that Yang Tao was not meant to rule the world. Wei Ci's expression was a little complicated as he thought about what happened in his past life. In his past life, those who fought with His Majesty for the world either killed themselves because they could not stand the failure or were beheaded by His Majesty. Most of them did not have a good ending. It was not that His Majesty could not tolerate them. On the contrary, these feudal vassals had been raised by the chaos of the world. How could they be willing to be under someone else when the world was at peace? They always had various concerns. They were worried that His Majesty would be afraid of them and harm them. Rather than struggling at death's door under his old enemy, it was better to end it all. If he died before the chaos ended, he would be considered a hero of his generation. Yang Tao was the odd one out among them. His Majesty used powerful troops to suppress Yang Tao. Yan Lin was defeated and fell into the trap. Guess what that brat Yang Tao did? He was willing to give up everything in exchange for Yan Lin's life. At that time, Yang Tao still had an extremely rich territory. If he gathered his troops, he could still resist for a few months. He surrendered without hesitation. Yan Lin was so angry that he picked up his weapon and hammered Yang Tao. Wei Ci really wanted to cry out for His Majesty. His Majesty was not a narrow-minded person. In his past life, when Yang Tao surrendered, His Majesty did not make things difficult for his family. He even gave him the important task of leading troops to conquer the world. After the Zhang dynasty was founded, Yang Tao was conferred the title of nobility. Although it was not hereditary, as long as his descendants were successful, at least his family would be able to gain a foothold in the court. That was not all. He was also one of the 10 generals who entered the Golden Scale Pavilion. If the title of nobility was a little exaggerated and somewhat comforting, then entering the Golden Scale Pavilion was a real military achievement. Of course, the Golden Scale Pavilion in his past life was not the Golden Scale Pavilion of today. Today, the Golden Scale Pavilion was an academy where countless books were gathered. But in his past life, the Golden Scale Pavilion was also known as Path to Heaven, meaning to ascend to heaven in one step. Only civil and military officials who had made great contributions to the people, the court, and the emperor were qualified to have their portraits placed in the pavilion and enjoy the incense offerings of the royal family and the people. Even if the emperor came to the Golden Scale Pavilion, he still had to dismount from his carriage and walk to offer incense. Yang Tao was in the top 5. His friend and mother, Yan Lin, was in the top 3. Wei Ci? No ranking. Not popular. Under a smiley face, angle. Under this was very sad. Chapter 1160. Although he was ambitious, when he thought of the current lineup under the Lord's tent, even Wei Ci could not help but gasp. Why? He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to get a place. In his previous life, His Majesty had specially built the Golden Scale Pavilion to commend the meritorious officials. 10 civil and military officials were to be selected. At first, it was decided that they would take 9 people each. This was because the number of people in the world started with 1 and ended with 9. The number 10 was not auspicious. However, His Majesty was stubborn and stubbornly insisted on choosing 10 people, implying that everything was perfect. The other officials' objections were ineffective. Not to mention others, Xueqi, Fengjin, and Sun Wen, the 3 of them died in a strange way in his previous life and had no fate with the Golden Scale Pavilion. It was different now. As long as they could survive until the world was settled, would the Golden Scale Pavilion be without them? The number of places on the list of civil officials had been reduced by 3. Thinking about the strategists who had successively submitted to the Lord in the previous life, Wei Ci could not help but feel nervous. Why call it the Golden Scale Pavilion? Just call it the investiture of the gods. Wei Ci sat at the bow of the boat, enjoying the golden sunlight and the fresh river breeze. He dug out the old almanac from the depths of his memory. Since there were ranks, there would naturally be a first and a second. But who would be the champion of civil and military affairs? The officials argued until their faces turned red. The commoners and the aristocratic families were at a stalemate. Although His Majesty had taken advantage of the chaotic times to beat the aristocratic families to the point that they did not dare to show their faces, the establishment of the Zhang dynasty was in urgent need of manpower. The aristocratic families were full of talents, and this was a good opportunity for them to take advantage of the situation. The civil and martial arts ranking list of the Golden Scale Pavilion had become the stage for them to compete against each other. The poor and the aristocratic families did not give way to each other, and the poor were slowly rising. If the second and third generation could stabilize their footsteps, sooner or later they would be able to enter the ranks of the noble families, and even become a new aristocratic family. Most of the important officials in the imperial court came from poor families, so the aristocratic families couldn't do anything to them. They could only pinch their noses and take a step back to prevent both sides from suffering. After all, His Majesty was above their heads. There were a total of 10 spots in the civil and martial roll. The 2 factions would split it equally. How about this? After dividing the places, they began to fight for the first place in the civil and martial roll. Fengjin would definitely be the first among the civil officials, right? He had followed Her Majesty since she was still a bandit. Without Fengjin's years of planning, Her Majesty's unification of the world would have been full of twists and turns. Yang Tao was definitely the number 1 general, right? His overall strength was very strong, and his prestige in the military was very high. It didn't seem wrong for him to take first place. Wei Ci had no objections to being the top civil official candidate, but the candidate for the top military general was really a scam. Did the aristocratic families think that the bonfire under Yang Tao's but wasn't strong enough and wanted to add another match? Yang Tao's identity was sensitive, and his martial arts were not top-notch. If he tried to compete for the number 1 general, he would be courting death. The aristocratic families didn't care about this. They couldn't accept being suppressed by the poor. The result? His Majesty had been sitting calmly on the fishing platform, indifferently watching their war of words. When the civil and military ranks were listed, the two sects were dumbfounded. They had been arguing for so long, but His Majesty had not taken their words seriously at all? The first civil official was not the popular candidate, Feng Ju. Instead, it was Qiguan Rang, who came from a humble background and kept a low profile. Feng Ju was the second. This was something that even Wei Si had not expected. If he remembered correctly, he clearly remembered that His Majesty had placed Feng Ju's portrait first. The number one general was Fu Wang, a fellow who was criticized by the outside world for having the ambition of a wolf. His birth was extremely low. 60% of the people from poor families were from poor families. It was an overwhelming victory. However, the poor did not have the last laugh. In addition to the civil and military roles, His Majesty had also set up the heavenly works role. Unlike the aristocratic families or poor families that relied on their families to form a group or were about to form a group, the heavenly works role was only for individuals. Regardless of man or woman, poor or young, as long as they could invent things that benefited the people, the national defense, and the country, they would contribute to the nation and benefit the world, they would all be on the roll. The country would come forward to promote their skills and would even give a portion of the profits to the individual. Although it was only a portion, the profits were enough to make all the merchants in the world jealous. The first bastard to be on the heavenly works roll had even taken a spot on the martial roll. He could be said to be a real winner in life. Wei Si's trip to Nanxing this time was not only to persuade Yang Tao to form an alliance, but he also wanted to take that bastard away. This person was none other than the treasure that Wei Si had found in his previous life. Bai Ning. He didn't believe that he wouldn't be able to coax that fellow to join in Xueqi's camp in his previous life. In this life, he wouldn't be able to do the same. Wei Si carefully checked his memory and found that there was nothing missing. Only then did he relax and lean against the bough to take a nap. Perhaps it was because what he thought about during the day, Wei Si kept muttering before he fell asleep. In his dreams, he also remembered the content that he had not dug out. In his dreams, Wei Si came to congratulate Bai Ning and congratulated him for making 2 rolls. However, the other party twirled his white beard. There was no joy on his face. Instead, he looked depressed. Sigh, Zixiao. Among the visitors who came today, you are the only one who feels the most comfortable. It's just to congratulate you, nothing else. The other party looked at the fish pond under the corridor and said gloomily, I was born in a poor family. Naturally, I also want to compete with the aristocratic families in the court and fight for a way out for the vast number of scholars from poor families, but the person above us is really frightening. If it wasn't for His Majesty not allowing it, I really want to retire so that I don't have to be a rat in a bellows and be bullied by both sides. As a popular person, he had received olive branches from both factions. However, Bai Ning, who knew the inside story, did not want to get involved. Hence he was worried. What do you mean? The other party asked mysteriously, how do you think I got on the heavenly craftsman roll? Wei Si said, naturally, it's because I offered the secret recipe for gunpowder and firearms, strengthened the national defense, and contributed to the country. The other party chuckled and shook his head continuously. No. It's just because His Majesty likes me. Maybe it's because of you. Wei Si was about to ask in detail when Bai Ning said earnestly, when the poor and the aristocratic families fight, both sides will suffer. No matter how they fight, can they escape from His Majesty's palm? To put it bluntly, even if His Majesty is a distinguished guest, as long as the royal bloodline is still there and the heavenly craftsman role is still there, both factions are just toys in the palm of the emperor's hand. Zixiao, don't get involved. Wei Si smiled bitterly. I'm just a small figure. How can I get involved in the battle between the gods? He had completely lost hope after the meteorite that fell from the sky a while ago. Well, if you think so, I have nothing to say. Bai Ning seemed to think of something and said, previously, you supported the Wei family. The Wei family used the tiger skin to flaunt their strength and offended many people intentionally or unintentionally. Now that the situation is tense, the aristocratic families don't dare to go too far. You took the opportunity to lie low, which can be considered a good strategy for self-protection. Once the 3 roles of civil, martial, and heavenly craftsman are out, the mad dogs that bit you previously stopped. Then Bai Ning rambled on and on. Wei Si listened carelessly at that time, drinking cup after cup of sake into his stomach. He could not remember what Bai Ning said, but it was very clear in the dream. Her Majesty can put whoever she wants on the heavenly crafts ranking. She'll throw you a prescription and let you take advantage of it for free and put on a show with her. With a whoosh, you'll be able to enter the imperial court even though you're just a commoner. This speed is even faster than ascension. To put it bluntly, the aristocratic families and the poor fight back and forth for the sake of benefits. The accumulation of generations is not as good as the rewards from His Majesty. Sigh, the more I think about it, the more I feel that the water is too deep. It's better to go back to my hometown and continue to sell firecrackers. What's the use of fighting between the poor and aristocratic families? Zixiao, don't you think so? The aristocratic families referred to noble families that had been officials for generations. In the era when the dissemination of books and education was difficult, they occupied a lot of resources. After generations of accumulation, they educated countless talents. The educated talents could also consolidate the family's interests, accumulate more resources, and make the entire interest group indestructible. In the end, the success of the aristocratic families lay in their rich capital, which allowed them to stand higher than others. If life was a competition, the poor were born at the starting point, while the aristocratic families were born at the halfway point or even the end. But, no matter how many resources the aristocratic families controlled, no matter how rich their heritage was, they were still limited by the development of the times. While everyone fought with cold weapons and on horseback, His Majesty could take out the recipe for gunpowder and more and give it to any trusted confidant. A small recipe, coupled with His Majesty's secret support, could instantly give birth to another rising force, disrupting the rhythm of the poor and aristocratic families. If they could not keep up with the pace of the times, regardless of whether they were aristocratic or poor, they would eventually be abandoned by the times. It was like flying a kite. The person who controlled the reel was His Majesty. How high and how far the kite flew was all in her control. Bai Ning always thought that His Majesty would go overboard, but it turned out that the people who went overboard were the aristocratic families and poor families. They were led by the nose and did not know it. Wei Ci clearly realized that he was dreaming, and the content was a memory deep in his mind. He remembered clearly that he visited Bai Ning that day, but he was depressed and unable to calm down. He also wanted to enter the civil officials list, but it was a delusion. When Bai Ning took out good wine to entertain him, Wei Ci drank a lot out of depression and did not understand what Bai Ning said. But now he dreamed of it. In the dream he was muddle-headed, but he heard it clearly. Like a sudden clap of thunder, the scattered clues gradually pieced together. His Majesty. Wei Ci was shocked and suddenly opened his eyes. The dazzling sunlight hurt his eyes. He subconsciously turned his head to avoid it, and it took him a long time to adapt. When he regained consciousness, Wei Ci realized that he was breaking out in a cold sweat. Everything in the dream became clearer. He thought he understood His Majesty very well, understood the current lord very well, but when he thought back to the dream, Wei Ci found it hard to believe that what he understood might only be the tip of the iceberg. In the previous life, His Majesty had already started to plot. She was playing a very, very big game of chess, but he had no idea. At the same time, Jiang Pengji opened her eyes and withdrew her mental strength from the yin and yang jade pendant in time. She supported her chin with her left hand and twirled the brush with her right. She muttered, "Bai Ning? Which little demon is this?" Just as she was thinking, a messenger came from outside the tent. Report, an urgent secret report from the front lines. Come in. Jiang Pengji restrained her unnecessary thoughts. The messenger hurriedly entered the tent and handed over a sealed bamboo tube. She casually pinched the bamboo tube and broke it, taking out the secret letter inside. Wei Ci had gone to Nanxing on a business trip, but Su Bei would not stop fighting because of this. Regardless of whether it was Su Bei or her, both sides were on the brink of life and death. The two families did not erupt into a large-scale war, only small skirmishes. For example, when they attacked a small district, you retreated and I advanced, I retreated and you advanced. Gentle was like flirting. Jiang Pengji knew what Su Bei was waiting for. He was waiting for Huang Song to send troops. She was also waiting for Wei Ci's news, waiting for Huang Song to enter the fray. If she did not press Huang Song and Su Bei to the ground and rub against them, she would feel sorry for Zixiao's hard work these few days. Sigh, they've become thinner and darker. Staring at Huang Song's secret letter, Jiang Pengji sighed. Chapter 1161. It's my honor to run errands for my lord. It's not hard at all. The messenger was overjoyed. He spoke his mind honestly. This time, it was Jiang Pengji's turn to be confused. What did he mean? Before Jiang Pengji said anything, the audience in the streaming room reacted first. Demon King Yanlin. Ha ha ha, this messenger boy is a little cute. Streamer. Do a good deed and don't shatter his sweet dreams. Zi Xiao Xiao. Let this beautiful misunderstanding continue. It's a pity to shatter it. Yao Wing Yun. Poor boy. Shenyuan Mingjing. The messenger boy's mental state at this moment should be like this. Why does my lord suddenly care about me? Could it be that she's secretly in love with me because of my good looks? But I still want to build a career and protect my descendants. If my lord takes a fancy to me, won't I marry into her family? What should I do? What should I do? Shouldn't I express that I'm a little tight? Xinjia. Wrong. The young boy's mental state at this moment should be like this. Come on, my lord, don't pity this delicate flower. A group of toxic onlookers gathered together and created hilarious jokes all the time. Even if Jiang Pengji was mentally strong, she had to admit that they were talented. Streamer V. Chen Duxiu, do you want me to buy you 2 bottles of Dihua Xiu, plant a few orange trees, and build a few train stations? Although Jiang Pengji and the idol viewers lived in a different era by thousands of years, she was someone who kept up with the trends. She could learn and apply the jokes and memes that the audience created on the screen after a little pondering. She knew all about the Italian canon of the 2nd Battalion Commander, Chen Duxiu and Li Dazhao, Dihua Xiu hand sanitizer, god of creation, train stations, and orange trees. But Jiang Pengji still underestimated the shamelessness of the idol. As soon as she spoke, the screen was filled with bullet screens of yes, 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 and front row, screenshot and photo with the streamer. It was spectacular. Jiang Pengji was not a streamer who liked to interact with the audience. She had only spoken a few times in the streaming room for so many years. There were busybodies on the internet who collected her speeches over the years and edited them into a book and published it. She couldn't imagine what kind of immoral things these salted fish wouldn't do. After going through thousands of thoughts in her mind, Jiang Pengji put away the secret letter with her usual expression. She said to the messenger with a gentle expression, "Secret military reports can determine the outcome of a battle. You have fulfilled your duty and delivered the news to both places in time. You have done a good job and deserve praise." The messenger could no longer maintain his calm expression, and he thanked him happily. For many soldiers, if they could get a word of praise from their lord, it was far more joyous than being promoted or rewarded. His lord had said that he had become darker and thinner. It was obvious that she had paid attention to him and remembered him. It was as if he was stepping on cotton, and he floated away happily. Jiang Pengji laughed involuntarily. Her originally heavy mood brightened up with this little episode. Her mood brightened, but Huang Song and Su Bei were not so happy. Su Bei had thought that he could use the mother and son of the prostitute to turn the tables on Jiang Pengji. At the very least, he could cripple Yang Si. Among the people in Jiang Pengji's tent, only Yang Si was most familiar with Shanghai and Zhe counties. If Yang Si was crippled, the pressure on Su Bei's side would be greatly alleviated. Unexpectedly, the secret weapon that Huang Song had sent did not achieve the desired effect. Yang Si had nothing to do with the prostitute, and he was also not the father of the boy. He was not cuckolded. Under such circumstances, he still tried to accuse Yang Si and forcefully blackmail him. That was too shameless, and it went against the way of a gentleman. Not only did he not achieve his expectations, but he also had a belly full of anger. Naturally, Su Bei had to find an outlet to vent his anger. Needless to say, the mother and son were directly dealt with. As if this was not enough to vent his anger, Su Bei still wanted to demand an explanation from Huang Song. What secret weapon to deal with Yang Si? He had made a fool of himself in front of Yang Si. Su Bei scolded Huang Song. Although the content of the letter was worded elegantly, the hidden bitterness that assaulted one's face made one's teeth ache. TSK. 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 She was exactly like a resentful wife who had not seen her husband for a year and a half. Cheng Jing and the rest understood the cause and effect of the matter. They all frowned. Wenbin is working for Su Bei. How could he watch Su Bei do such a foolish thing? Regardless of whether the mother and son were real or not, Only by revealing it at the critical moment could it achieve a fatal effect and not give Yangtze a chance to retaliate. What was the use of impatiently playing this card now? Instead, it gave Yangtze time to react. In fact, Yangtze had cleanly brushed it off with a few words. The most important thing was, Yang Jingrong appears to be a person who does not reveal the mountain and does not reveal the water. In fact, he is meticulous and has the ability to see through the smallest details. The alliance between the two families is a secret. However, with Su Bei's actions, how could Yang Jingrong not guess the truth? I'm afraid that Lu Shi's side has already made sufficient preparations. If the enemy was prepared, how could a sneak attack achieve the desired effect? It was not without reason that Cheng Jing said that Su Bei was too stupid. He had obtained a trump card and could not wait to show it off in front of the enemy. If this was not stupid, then what was? Cheng Jing and Han Yu were from the same sect and knew each other very well. He did not believe that Han Yu could not see the trick behind it. Feng Ju frowned slightly. He had to admit that Cheng Jing's words were reasonable. Although Su Bei has some flaws, with the current situation, it's better to have another ally than to fight alone. Once Su Bei fell, the next one to be beaten would definitely be Huang Song. Who asked Huang Song's territory to be next to Jiang Pengji's? Normal people could not stand their neighbors coveting them with a knife, let alone a feudal lord. If Su Bei was slightly stronger, Huang Song could wait for him and Jiang Pengji to fight until both sides were injured and then reap the benefits. However, they had overestimated Su Bei. Under such circumstances, only the Huang and Su families working together could create the safest situation. Only by getting rid of the most threatening enemy could the two families be at ease and slowly tear each other apart. At the same time, Wei Ci arrived at his destination. The current Yang Tao was no longer a nobody watching the big shots fight for the world. He had also grown into a colossus in the eyes of others. His influence in Dongqing only covered half of Zhangzhou, but his territory in Nanxing included 1 province and 4 counties. Although it was not the richest and most populous place in Nanxing, it was enough for him to gain a foothold. In order to gain a foothold, Yang Tao even formed an alliance with Xueqi to advance and retreat together. The situation in Nanxing was far more chaotic than in Dongqing. Not only were there internal strife between the feudal lords and aristocratic families, but there was also the plundering and invasion of the 4 factions of Nanman. Wei Ci found out about the situation and sighed in disappointment. The Nanxing in front of him was both familiar and unfamiliar. As he asked someone to hand over the documents, he packed lightly and brought only a few guards with him. He prepared some meager gifts and went to look for Bai Ning. Bai Ning came from a humble background. His ancestors made firecrackers, so he had some assets. However, due to several generations of poor management, Bai Ning's business was on the verge of bankruptcy. Troubled times came again, and the 4 factions of Nanman led their troops to wreak havoc on the people and land of Nanxing. Bai Ning simply abandoned his family business and picked up weapons. He led the able-bodied men in the village to become volunteers and protect the old and young in the village. Bai Ning's business was not doing well, but he had a reputation as a chivalrous man. Wei Ci did not know if Bai Ning had been recruited by other forces, so he could only try his luck. As soon as he arrived in Pengjun, Wei Ci knew that this trip might be fruitful. Chapter 1162. We've already eaten and drunk. Old man, you should get to work. Bai Ning was shirtless with his trousers rolled up. He grabbed a handful of fodder and stuffed it into the mule's mouth. The mule turned its face away in disgust. The weather was hot, and the air was filled with impatience. Bai Ning was not a patient person. He tried to persuade the mule, but the mule still refused to carry its food. His temper flared up. You beast! Could it be that you want to be skinned and your bones pulled out to be roasted as donkey meat? Bai Ning threatened the mule. The mule was still indifferent. He rolled his eyes and snorted coldly. He twisted his body and pointed his butt at Bai Ning. Bai Ning was about to get angry when Wei Ci stepped forward with a smile. Are you Hero Bai? Bai Ning heard someone calling him. He temporarily put aside the idea of arguing with the mule and turned to look at the person. It's rare to see such a delicate person in this world. Bai Ning threw away the fodder in his hand, stroked the beard on his face, and cracked a smile. Judging from your accent, you don't sound like a local, and you don't look like someone who was robbed by bandits to seek justice. Bai Ning was 39 years old. He was considered to be in his prime. His exposed chest was strong and firm, and there was a layer of sweat on his surface. Wei Si calmly stopped the guards who were about to step forward. He looked at Bai Ning with a smile. I'm indeed a foreigner. I heard that Hero Bai had settled down here, so I prepared a small gift and came to visit. If I've offended you in any way, I hope you can forgive me. Bai Ning felt uncomfortable when he heard this. He was an uncouth man. The neighbors he came in contact with were also uncouth. He rarely interacted with scholars. He saw that Wei Si's clothes were neat and tidy, but he was bare-chested. His thick pants were tied at his waist with a hemp rope. However, Bai Ning was also a thick-skinned person. His bronze-colored skin did not show the slightest bit of embarrassment. Oh, so you're looking for me? Bai Ning looked at Wei Si with a faint smile, sizing him up from his feet to his head. His eyes flashed with satisfaction. Bai Ning casually pulled over a bench, sat down, crossed his long legs, and looked like a rascal. He patted the other corner of the bench with his right hand. Don't beat around the bush, just say what you want to say. Come, young lad, sit down and talk. When Wei Si saw this familiar scene, he could not help but secretly laugh. Bai Ning had done the same thing in his previous life. At that time, Wei Si felt that this person was rude and disgraceful, but due to his upbringing, he did not say anything. Not only did he not feel offended by meeting an old friend in this life, he even found it a little interesting. Moreover, Bai Ning was 39 this year. He was much older than Wei Si and could barely be considered as part of his father's generation. It would be impolite to refuse. It was Bai Ning's turn to feel uncomfortable. Bai Ning's temperament was like this. If you were unreasonable to him, he would be even more unreasonable. If you were to soften, he wouldn't be able to be unreasonable at all. Tell me the truth. What are you doing in a remote and desolate place? Wei Si smiled and said, Didn't I say it just now? Si has specially come to look for Hero Bai. Bai Ning didn't believe this. Outsiders called him Hero Bai because he led the youths in the countryside to repel the bandits and maintain the peace of the region, earning himself a good reputation. Bai Ning knew that this could only be regarded as a small quarrel. How could it provoke a gentleman like Wei Si in front of him? Then why are you looking for me? Bai Ning looked at Wei Si's appearance and then thought of his own. Bai Ning, who had always been casual and sloppy, felt goosebumps all over his body. Wei Si said, Of course it's to recruit Hero Bai, so that a bright pearl will not be covered in dust. Bai Ning was startled and couldn't help but pick his ear with his little finger. What did you say? A bright pearl will be covered in dust? Him. Has the brain of this fool in front of him been cracked open? I'm just a boorish man. I only have strength but no other skills. Bai Ning rubbed his hands awkwardly and stood up suddenly. He grabbed the reins hanging on the mule and tightened his muscles all over his body. He looked rather frightened. You should find someone else for this matter. Hero Bai, why are you so modest? Wei Si said, If you have no talent, how can you resist thousands of thugs with just a few hundred youths in the countryside? A few years ago, the southern barbarians wreaked havoc, and Peng County also fell under the tyranny of the barbarians. Only this place is still considered peaceful. Don't tell me that there aren't any heroes here? Heroes say that they have no talent and incompetence, but when it comes to arranging troops and formations, many old generals also sigh at their inferiority. When Wei Si said this, Bai Ning was like a wild cat that had been provoked and his hair stood on end. There was a hint of fierceness in his eyes. Wei Si continued, Now that the world is in chaos, don't the heroes want to clear the Jade Universe? Being content in a corner will only cause a bright pearl to be covered in dust. Bai Ning dragged the mule and roared anxiously. It's none of your business. Wei Si followed closely and didn't force him. The poor mule still wanted to stay where it was, but Bai Ning's strength was too great. He could even lift a big cauldron of 3 or 4 stone at will, let alone this stubborn mule. The mule rubbed a long mark on the ground. In the end, it couldn't bear it anymore and took the initiative to follow Wei Si. Wei Si followed Bai Ning all the way to his house. Bai Ning's ancestors sold firecrackers and could barely be considered well off. Unfortunately, the past 2 generations were not good at managing the business. Bai Ning was already very poor and could barely make ends meet. In order to support his family, Bai Ning often went hunting in the mountains and earned more money than selling firecrackers. After Wei Ci recruited by Ning in his previous life, he heard him talk about his youth. When Bai Ning was young, he saved a crippled old general who had become a beggar. His martial arts and military tactics were all taught by the general. Bai Ning was not successful in business, but he was very talented in martial arts, far more outstanding than the old general. However, Bai Ning came from a humble background and was worried about his old parents at home, so he never joined the army. This dragged on until he was middle-aged and the world was in chaos. "This is my house, get out." When Bai Ning saw Wei Ci following him, he grabbed the fence of his house and used his sturdy body to block the way. Wei Ci laughed. Yi observed the stars and calculated with his fingers. "I found out that Hero Bai's teacher is the former tiger general of Nanxing, Gu Chun. Is that true?" Bai Ning's expression froze and his large eyes widened. "That's not true. I don't know any Gu Chun or Gu Xia." "Hero Bai, don't be anxious. Nanxing has already been destroyed. Even if the matter of General Gu Chun is known, it won't bring Hero Bai a fatal disaster." Gu Chun. This was what Wei Ci deduced after careful research in his previous life and was later confirmed by Bai Ning. During the last years of Nanxing, the army was conscripted to suppress the 4 factions of Nanman. The tiger general Gu Chun made many contributions. Gu Chun was loyal to the emperor and had a straightforward and unyielding character. He offended many nobles and aristocratic families. The latter were afraid that Gu Chun would win in the crusade against Nanman, so they decided to strike first and delay the reinforcements and supplies. Gu Chun was ambushed by the 4 factions of Nanman. The battle report said that he died in battle and his corpse was eaten by the war beasts raised by the 4 factions of Nanman. Later, he was convicted by the court of a groundless crime and implicated his family. Chapter 1163. What are you waiting for? Get straight to the point. What do you want? Bai Ning was so anxious that he didn't even speak Ye Yen. Instead, he used Pengjuan's dialect. After he finished speaking, his face revealed an awkward expression. Bai Ning repeated each word in Ye Yen. "Child, if you have something to say, just say it. What do you want?" Wei Ci had a faint smile on his face, as if he didn't see Bai Ning losing his composure. "I'm sincerely inviting Hero Bai to come out of retirement. It's a pity that your talents are buried in the countryside." Bai Ning said again, "Are you bullying me because I'm not well educated? You liar. Go away or I'll beat you up." Wei Ci was surprised. In his previous life, Bai Ning was also very resistant to coming out of retirement, but not as strongly as he was now. "Lying to die?" Wei Ci laughed. "I'm sincerely inviting you without any deceit." Bai Ning's face was fierce. He had an expression that said, "I don't want to listen, I don't want to listen, I just don't want to listen." Wei Ci had no choice but to use his killer move. "How about this? I'll make a bet with you. If I win, Hero Bai, why don't you consider becoming an official?" Bai Ning raised his eyebrows. His raised beard swayed in the air. He said in a rough voice, "What about you if you lose?" Wei Ci said, "I'll be at your disposal." Bai Ning clapped his hands and let go of the fence gate. He rubbed his palms excitedly. "That's good. Then don't go back on your word. There's only one thing. I won't marry a wife, take a concubine, or marry into your family." As soon as Wei Ci said this, Bai Ning's excited expression stiffened, revealing an expression as if he had seen a ghost. Wei Ci smiled and said, "Although I don't have a wife or children, my heart belongs to someone. I'm afraid that Hero Bai's plan will fail." Bai Ning's voice changed. "How do you know?" Wei Ci said. "I just said it. I observed the stars at night and calculated with my fingers. I know the big and small matters of the past 30 years. I'm not lying." In fact, Bai Ning had proposed marriage to Wei Ci in his previous life. Bai Ning had a daughter who was extremely ugly. She was over 23 years old and was still unmarried. She had been a virgin for a long time, but she was still unmarried. If it weren't for Bai Ning's protection in the countryside, the villagers would have been indebted to him. Otherwise, the rumors and slanders would have killed his daughter. In Wei Ci's previous life, Bai Ning's recruitment was delayed by 1 or 2 years. At that time, his daughter was not married yet, let alone in this life. "What else do you know?" "I know a little," Wei Ci said, The content of the bet is simple. I will randomly calculate 2 things. If they are accurate, I will win. How about that? Bai Ning felt guilty, but Wei Ci did not look like a fortune teller who set up a stall on the streets. 15 minutes later. Who is your lord? Bai Ning was also depressed. He was just a rough man from the countryside. How could he have imagined that there would be an immortal-like gentleman who would come to recruit him? Moreover, he even acted as if he was determined to win. Since when did he become so popular? Wei Ci smiled and said, My master is Lord Lanting of Dongqing, the governor of Wanzhou. My lord dispatched Ci Nan to discuss the matter of forming an alliance with Yang Tao. Ci Bandao heard of righteous hero Bai's heroic act of protecting the village and was filled with admiration. Thus, he searched for you several times and personally came to invite you. Bai Ning was stunned. From Dongqing? Wei Ci knew what he was hesitating about. Righteous hero Bai. Pengjun is the site of 3 wars. It won't be peaceful for long. If you insist on staying here, the safety of your family will be difficult to guarantee. As far as Wei Ci knew, it was not that Bai Ning had never thought of becoming an official. However, he was already old. Almost 40 years old was considered old in the ranks of military generals. Moreover, he was of low birth. If he joined the army, he could only be a low-ranking soldier. He was almost the most worthless cannon fodder on the battlefield. Even if he had the courage to kill the enemy, the barracks could not even provide weapons and armor. Who could he kill? It was very difficult for a low-ranking soldier to climb up. Every step was made by piling up the enemy's heads. Bai Ning was an old man and had almost no chance of making a name for himself. Instead of that, he might as well stay in Pengjun and lead the village soldiers to fight the bandits. It was not that Bai Ning did not understand. Since the fall of Nanxing, Pengjun had changed more than 20 masters in a few years. There were fewer young adults and it was more difficult to survive. However, Bai Ning did not want to leave his hometown and run to another country. Let me think again. Although the bet did not force Bai Ning to join, Wei Ci's calculations were accurate. Bai Ning had to be cautious. In this world that did not believe in science, a quack like Wei Ci was quite popular. This was made by your daughter? Wei Ci looked at the crossbow placed on the wooden shelf in the room and took it down to play with it. What a clever idea. Bai Ning said proudly, Of course it was made by our Xia. It's the best in the surrounding area. Wei Ci was not surprised by Bai Ning's performance. There were many reasons why Bai Yuexia had been dragged from a virgin to an old unmarried woman, not just because of her appearance. Although she was ugly, she was smart and quick-witted since she was a child. She could learn anything with just a little bit. It was said that she was even taught by the current generation of Mahists. She was very excellent in the art of mechanisms. She was really a woman with a clear mind. Because her appearance was not good, she wanted to find a husband who was talented in appearance but not limited to appearance. Apart from that, she had other high requirements. She scared off a group of suitors, but Bai Ning still indulged her. With Bai Ning supporting her, Bai Yuexia did not have to worry about when she would get married. Just as they were talking, a clear female voice came from outside. Father, there's a guest at home? Wei Ci looked over and saw a plainly dressed woman push open the door and enter. She looked mature, but her hair was tied up in a bun like an unmarried woman. Bai Yuexia's appearance took after her father. Her facial features tended to be strong, and the lines of her face were not as soft as ordinary women. At first glance, one would think that she was a man. Her eyebrows were thick, her eyes were dark and bright, and her skin was a little dark yellow and rough. If that was all, she would not be called ugly. However, there was a huge purple-brown birthmark on her face, which occupied most of her face. She looked as ferocious as a malicious spirit. Seeing that there was an immortal-like beauty in the house, Bai Yuexia could not help but take a few more glances. Wei Ci's expression was calm. He was not frightened by her appearance at all, and there was no look of contempt in his eyes. This made Bai Yuexia unable to help but take a few more glances. This is a distinguished guest from Dongqing. Xia, go and make a pot of tea for the guest. Bai Yuexia bowed slightly and did as she was told. I wonder what brings this esteemed guest to my humble abode? Bai Ning said, He's here to persuade me to become an official, but I haven't decided yet. I want to hear Xia's opinion. A distinguished guest from Dongqing? Become an official? Bai Yuexia's hand that was making tea paused. She asked hesitantly, Sir, are you working for Lord Lanting? Bai Ning said, Yes, that's what he said. Wei Xi laughed. Bai Nyongzi is very intelligent. You guessed correctly. There are only a few families in Dongqing. I was just guessing randomly. Bai Yuexia showed a rare look of embarrassment. She lowered her head shyly and said softly, I have also guessed others, but among the many families in Dongqing, only Lord Lanting does not care about family background and only uses talent. Bai Ning's family background was very low, but Wei Xi personally came to invite him. It seemed that only Zhang Pengji could do so. Bai Ning looked at his daughter as if he had seen a ghost. This shy little girl in front of him was really his daughter? Wei Xi was speechless. Wait. Chapter 1164. In his previous life, he and Bai Yuexia had not interacted much, but he knew that Bai Yuexia had a mysterious love and closeness for His Majesty. The way Bai Yuexia looked at His Majesty always made him unhappy. Now that he thought about it, that gaze contained not only reverence and worship, but also a deeper meaning. Wei Xi's expression did not change, but his heart was in turmoil. Bai Ning laughed. Apart from her looks, Xia is good in everything. She's worthy of the best man in the world. After saying that, Bai Ning signaled Wei Xi with his eyes. Should he change his mind and marry his daughter? Wei Xi smiled awkwardly and said, Hero Bai is right. Lady Bai will definitely find the best husband in the future. If it was in the past, Wei Xi would definitely not be worried. Ever since he found out about his lord's background, he was a little confused. The lord's background was mysterious. She must have been very open-minded in her previous life, so she regarded men as normal. Then, Wei Xi could not help but let his imagination run wild. It was normal for men to be attracted to men, so was it normal for women to be attracted to men? When he thought of this, he felt the pressure on his shoulders suddenly increase. Opening the door to a new world, Wei Xi turned his head and recalled again. He realized that he was surrounded by rivals in love. Among the many rivals in love, Bai Yuexia was the most threatening one. If they were to fight, Wei Xi felt that he could not defeat her. In her previous life, Bai Yuexia was a very low-key woman. However, no matter how low-key she was, it couldn't conceal the fact that she stood in the imperial court as a woman. She was the Minister of Works. A few years later, she paid her respects to the Prime Minister at the Golden Unicorn platform. Before she retired, she even sent her portrait to the Heavenly Craftsman ranking of the Golden Scale Pavilion. Just from the Golden Scale Pavilion's 3 lists of civil, martial, and heavenly works, Wei Xi, who did not even have a ranking in his previous life, was under immense pressure. After that, His Majesty proposed the policy of one family, 2 households. And Bai Yuexia was the first one in the court to stand up and support it. In comparison, Wei Xi was apprehensive of the power in the imperial court and reacted a beat slower, unlike Bai Yuexia who staked everything on one throw. What was one door, 2 households? To put it bluntly, a family was allowed to have 2 heads of household. Children born to a woman could inherit both the family property of their mother and the family property of their father. The children's surname and household registration could be decided through consultation. Many officials thought that this policy was specially established to ensure that the Empress would continue to exist for a long time. At the beginning of the proposal, almost no one objected. If they were to oppose the one family, 2 households policy, wouldn't they be supporting the Empress in a disguised form? Just like ordinary women and children who married their husbands, wouldn't they? This was not nonsense. Whoever objected would have their brains filled with seawater. However, this was only the opinion of a mediocre person. Wei Xi was very clear that the one family with 2 households was actually to support the female household system. After the establishment of the Zhang dynasty, the world was at peace, and there were fewer and fewer women who set up their own households. In some places, there was even a culture of despising women. It wasn't that the women didn't want to establish a female household, it was just that there were too few good men who were willing to marry into the family, and the pressure of establishing a female household was too great. Many women could only choose to compromise. Even if they got married and earned more money, their income could only be regarded as supporting the family, and not supporting the family. In order to solve this problem, His Majesty proposed to have 2 heads of household and set up a series of new marriage laws. From the start of the new law, Jiang Chao had a clear concept of joint property after marriage. Of course, concubines and children born of concubines were not considered joint property. Their daily expenses and future marriage residences were only managed by the man. This made the majority of legal wives applaud and feel even more grateful to His Majesty. One had to know that before this system was introduced, many legal wives not only had to help their husbands take care of the family property, but they also had to manage the daily expenses and various trivial matters of the concubines and children born of concubines. When faced with a husband who favored his concubines to the detriment of his wife, the legal wives couldn't even defend the interests of themselves and their children. Although the one family with 2 households was to protect the continuation of the empress, they were also beneficiaries of the new law. At first, Jiang Chao men didn't care about this new law. Anyway, they didn't covet their wives' money. Even if there were people who coveted their wives' dowry, who would have the face to say it? There was nothing wrong with the imperial court promulgating laws to protect the empress, the royal family, and the legitimate children of the legal wife. However, not long after, many men started to complain. They couldn't stand this kind of grievance. There was a story that left a deep impression on Xueqi. An official paid a high monthly salary to hire the legal wife to take care of the children born of concubines and a house full of concubines. That's right, the husband paid the legal wife to help take care of the concubines and children born of concubines. The laws of the Jiang Chao dynasty stipulated that concubines couldn't touch the authority of a housekeeper. It was fine among the people. If it was discovered that a concubine had taken over the authority of the legal wife, it would at most cause a bad reputation. If an imperial court official was found to have a concubine touch the authority of a housekeeper, he would be demoted or even dismissed. Cultivating one's moral character, managing one's family, governing the country, and bringing peace to the world. If even the house was in a mess, how could one be an official if one didn't understand the orthodoxy? If the legal wife didn't care about the concubines and children born of concubines, then the husband could only take care of them himself. During the day, he would go out to earn money and work. At night, he would come back to settle accounts and take care of the concubines' rouge, cosmetics, and cloth materials. The men couldn't take it anymore. Many court officials took advantage of this to make things difficult for them. Since ancient times, men took care of external affairs while women took care of internal affairs. Concubines and children born of concubines were also the responsibility of the legal wife. In the end, they were ruthlessly beaten down by the empress and the aristocratic families, and soon there was no more movement. The Jiang Chao dynasty was newly established. Those who took in a bunch of concubines were mostly the new nobility or poor families who had gained power. Once they gained power, they became arrogant. There were many poor families who drove out their first wives or neglected their wives, and took in beautiful concubines. The aristocratic families had a long history. They had always claimed to be supporters of orthodoxy, and there were also strict rules for taking in concubines. For them, the loss of the new policy was not big. On the contrary, the poor families and the new nobility were angry. The aristocratic families took this opportunity to stand on the empress's side to suppress the poor families. As the leader of the female officials, Bai Yuexia was the direction and role model for all the women to work hard. She carried out the new policy and played a good role in leading the way. She had a son and a daughter. The son followed his husband, and the daughter followed her. Bai Yuexia's son was not capable, but her daughter was different. She became the crown princess Jiang Yan's most trusted confidant. From a rational point of view, Xueqi admired Bai Yuexia very much. When the world despised women, she reached such a high position that it was difficult for others to catch up to her. From an emotional point of view, Xueqi really couldn't force himself to like Bai Yuexia. It was good enough that he didn't treat her as a love rival. But if he could go back in time, he would still come to recruit Bai Ning. After all, the Lord's interests were the most important. Love was just a small matter. From what you said, Lady Bai admires my lord very much. Xueqi smiled warmly, like a quietly blooming spring flower, bright and warm. Bai Yuexia spoke quickly. The world treats women so unfairly, but the Duke of Lanting still walked to a point where no one can catch up to him. Isn't he a role model for all the women in the world? I've admired him for a long time. In a moment of excitement, I made a fool of myself in front of the teacher. I'm indebted to the Duke of Lanting for not abandoning me. If father can become an official and work for him, pacifying the world and clearing the Jade World, it will be a blessing for us father and daughter. Wei Ci was speechless. I only want to recruit your father. I didn't include you. Chapter 1165. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't upset. Wei Ci recalled many things from the past, such as the details of how he recruited Bai Ning in his previous life. In his previous life, he had tried to recruit Bai Ning on behalf of his lord, and Xue. At that time, he was poor and had only a few generals under him. And Xue did not have the right to look down on talent, so he recruited whoever he could. Although Bai Ning was old, he was still vigorous and could be considered a fierce general. An old steed in the stable had great ambitions. An old general who was almost 40 years old could not be underestimated. It wasn't difficult to recruit Bai Ning, but he had run into a snag with Bai Yuexia. She had even ridiculed his master, and Xue, in a neither soft nor hard way. However, and Xue was slightly cold and powerless at the time. Bai Yuexia's harsh words were the truth, so he couldn't act up in front of Bai Ning. Recalling his past life and comparing it to this life, Wei Ci almost vomited blood. In his past life, he had to persuade Bai Ning to become an official after much persuasion. Bai Yuexia ridiculed him, but he still had to maintain a polite smile. In this life, Bai Yuexia used her lord's name. Without a second word, she packed her father and herself into officialdom. It was obviously going so smoothly. Why was Wei Ci so unwilling? How infuriating! Since they had decided to become officials, Bai Ning and his daughter had to pack up their belongings and leave with Wei Ci. Wei Ci could use this time to persuade Yang Tao to form an alliance and send troops. Bai Ning was still in a daze even after Wei Ci left. Xia, do you really want to go to Dongqing? That place is far away from home. Father might not be able to protect you. Bai Ning drank the bitter sake and mumbled, I wanted to find a good family for you, but if you leave Pengjun, I'm afraid it won't be easy. Bai Yuexia was swiftly packing up her belongings. After the war, you can come back whenever you want. Bai Yuexia said, as for your daughter's marriage, you don't have to worry about it. They were just a bunch of boorish men who could only be seen by their appearance. To put it bluntly, they were nothing more than trash. I don't care for those with embroidered pillows. If I were to marry, it must be a man of great stature like the Duke of Lanting. I don't want to make do with just anyone. Bai Ning became even more worried. His thick black brows knitted into a knot. Ah Xia, the Duke of Lanting is a woman. That's why I'm looking for a man as capable as him. I'm not marrying the Duke of Lanting. Bai Yuexia looked at her father. What kind of tricks did he have in his mind? She's the role model of our generation of women. If we could live happily like her, how carefree would that be? Bai Yuexia really admired Jiang Pengji and became her die-hard fan in no time. She was a woman who was despised and criticized because of her appearance. How much had Bai Yuexia suffered and how many tears had she shed because of this face? It would have been fine if she was stupid, but she was slow in perceiving the malice of others. Naturally, she would not be hurt by it. However, she was extremely intelligent and couldn't turn a blind eye to it. Why couldn't her intelligence and talent win the recognition and love of others? This question perplexed her for many years. Only later did she realize that it was because she was ugly. For a woman, being ugly was an original sin. She could forget about getting anyone's attention in this lifetime. According to the rites of Zhou, a woman has 4 virtues. Virtue is speech and appearance. She thought that except for her lack of appearance, she had the other 3 virtues. Unfortunately, she still couldn't compare to those illiterate, vulgar, and even unfilial shrews in the countryside. Because they were good-looking and could give birth, they were considered perfect as a woman. How unfair was that? Although Bai Yuexia didn't show it, she had suppressed her feelings for many years. She had tried every possible way to reject the marriage that Bai Ning had proposed for her. Those men were just ordinary people. As soon as they saw her face, their eyes honestly reflected what they were thinking in their hearts. Disgust and contempt. Bai Yuexia was proud and arrogant. How could she tolerate herself groveling to someone who was inferior to her in every aspect? Once she groveled, her pride and dignity would be broken. It wasn't until after the Huang Shui meeting that Jiang Pengji's identity as a woman was revealed. Everyone in the world knew that Lu Shi was a woman and not a man. The moment she heard the news, Bai Yuexia was like a lone traveler in the dark who finally saw a bright light. It was dazzling and dazzling, hanging high in the sky. That kind of joy and excitement couldn't be understood by others. That was her son. At that moment, she really wanted to turn into Kuafu and chase after it until she died. Bai Ning didn't know what his daughter was thinking. He felt very ashamed. His old parents and wife had already turned to dust. Other than his daughter, he was all alone in the world. It was his fault that he wasn't able to let his daughter live a good life. Bai Ning watched his daughter pack up the pieces of wood on the shelves and asked, "Are we taking these away too?" "Of course. They might be useful in the future." Bai Yuexia nimbly packed them into the boxes. The wooden materials on the shelves in the house were all gadgets that she had made. There were 6 big boxes in total. "I heard that Zixiao wants to persuade Yang Tao to mobilize his troops. What do you think is the possibility of this happening?" Bai Ning couldn't help, so he tried to find a topic to chat about. 50-50, I think? Bai Yuexia said uncertainly. Yang Tao and Su Bei have a feud of half a province. Zhangzhou was seized. How could Yang Tao tolerate this? However, I see that Wei Zixiao is very confident. I'm afraid he has other bargaining chips that will allow him to easily persuade the other party. Bai Ning had also heard about the situation in Dongqing, but he didn't know as much as his daughter, who was chasing after her idol. He said, "When I have a firm foothold in Lord Lanting's camp, I will definitely find you a husband who is both talented and charming." Bai Yuexia's expression didn't change. She knew that her father was worried that if something happened to him, she would be lonely and have no one to rely on. Therefore, he wanted to create a small family for her so that she would have a foothold. However, she was already indifferent to marriage. As for a husband, she would leave it to fate. Bai Ning and his daughter waited for 2 days. That afternoon, a group of soldiers with extraordinary auras stood outside the house. After asking around, they found out that Wei Si had already convinced Yang Tao to form an alliance. Wei Si had asked Yang Tao to send someone to fetch the father and daughter. "How did you convince Yang Tao?" Bai Yuexia was astonished. Yang Tao's father's murderer, Zhao Shao, is under Su Bei's camp. Wei Si smiled and said, "Yang Tao lost half of Zhangzhou to Su Bei. He can't tolerate this. Moreover, if he waits for my lord to pacify the Huang and Su families, he won't be able to keep his half of Zhangzhou." No matter how well Yang Tao developed in Nanxing, his roots were in Dongqing. If he didn't seize this opportunity to return to Dongqing and gain a firm foothold, Dongqing would be her world after Jiang Pengji destroyed the Huang and Su families. Bai Yuexia's eyes lit up, but she said, "I heard that the Huang and Su families are powerful. Since the war at the northern borderline, the Duke of Lanting has been exhausted from fighting for a long time. Now that he's mobilized his troops against the 2 families, I wonder what his chances of winning are? It's not that my lord is belligerent. It's obvious that others aren't willing to lay down their butcher's knives. She has no choice but to fight," he said. "The chances of winning are not high. 100% is enough." If not for the Nye family of Zhongzhao's temporary withdrawal from the scene and the Yi family of Bei Yuan's domestic politics, Jiang Pengji would have to face the predicament of fighting on all sides. Now that it was 1 against 2, the difficulty was very low. Now that she had joined forces with Yang Tao, they still couldn't win 2 against 2. It was better to rest early. Bai Yuexia pursed her lips, her smile rippling. "I heard that the Duke of Lanting wrote to Su Bei and said, 'I want 100% of the 9 provinces and 4 seas.' Why was her lord so arrogant and likable?" Wei Si was speechless. Chapter 1166. Even though Wei Si spent 2 days to convince Yang Tao to form an alliance, the entire process was not smooth sailing. Instead, it was full of twists and turns. Yang Tao was in the pro-war faction, but his subordinates were not interested in it. If it weren't for Yanlin's support, Yang Tao wouldn't have been able to suppress all the opposing voices and form an alliance. Yang Tao's old subordinates were brought over from Dongqing, but after they took root in Nanxing, the talents they recruited were all locals of Nanxing. He was able to gain a foothold in Nanxing not only because of his old subordinates, but also because of the Nanxing family. As mentioned before, The aristocratic families occupied more than 60% of the world's wealth. The longer the inheritance, the richer the family's wealth. If they lacked manpower, they would send manpower. If they lacked money, they would send money. If they lacked soldiers, they would buy soldiers. There was nothing in this world that money couldn't buy. If there was something, it was definitely not enough. Yang Tao accepted the olive branch extended by the aristocratic families and received their generosity. Only then did he have the confidence to send troops to start his own empire. Since he had received benefits from them, he naturally had to give them something in return. After all, not everyone was like Jiang Pengji. She could forcefully reject the aristocratic families, but others did not have the confidence to do so. Even for Jiang Pengji, there was a certain element of luck in her success. During the earthquake in Shangjing, there were countless casualties and refugees everywhere. The royal family of Dongqing disregarded the lives of the people and forcefully moved the capital. The Qingyi army and the Red Lotus group took advantage of the situation to rise. Jiang Pengji seized the opportunity to stand up and become the backbone of the people of Wanzhou. They recruited soldiers and bought horses, absorbed young and strong refugees to strengthen themselves, and accumulated primitive capital by harming the northern borderline. At the same time, they mobilized troops to suppress the Qingyi army and the Red Lotus group, and plundered their assets. Her success is almost impossible to replicate. The right time, the right place, and the right people were indispensable. When Wei Ci came forward to persuade them to form an alliance, the officials under Yang Tao who were from aristocratic families were unwilling. They wanted to set their sights on Nanxing. He would unify Nanxing and make himself the emperor. What benefits could Yang Tao reap by crossing over to fight Su Bei and Huang Song? This battle was won, and the person who benefited the most was Jiang Pengji. Huang Song's and Su Bei's territories had all been taken over by her. If Yang Tao went to war, he would only be able to take back half of Zhangzhou at most. Dongqing had 6 prefectures and 21 counties. Among them, 5 prefectures and 19 counties were under Jiang Pengji's control. With the addition of the northern borderline, the territory under her rule was larger than the original Dongqing. It was more than enough for her to establish a country and ascend the throne. What's the point of Yang Tao only taking Zhangzhou? Don't be fooled by the fact that the children of aristocratic families looked like they were above the common people, but when it came to accounting, they were very shrewd. Wei Ci was put in a difficult position, but this was nothing to him. He knew 80% of these officials who were from Nanxing aristocratic families. Back when Shui returned to Nanxing to develop, he was penniless. In order to obtain the help of these aristocratic families, Wei Ci had put in a lot of effort. Even after so many years had passed, Wei Ci still remembered the situation of each family and their connections. He had not been afraid in his previous life, so how could he be afraid in this life? In the words of his lord, none of these landowning households could fight. Trying to persuade these people, rather than using extravagant promises, it was better to say 1 or 2 words that were concerned about their own interests. Although the opposition from the aristocratic families was loud, the final decision-maker was still made by Yang Tao. Yang Tao wasn't stupid. Even though he had borrowed the power of the aristocratic families, he wouldn't be turned into a puppet by the other party. Even if Yang Tao couldn't make it, he still had Yan Lin to protect his father. Military advisor, can't you persuade the Lord to give up on the idea of forming an alliance? Yan Lin said, the Lord has already made up her mind. There's no point in trying to persuade her. Putting aside the hatred of killing his father and seizing the state, Yan Lin didn't approve of Yang Tao and Jiang Pengji forming an alliance. The reason could be summed up in 4 words: asking a tiger for its skin. During the alliance meeting at Xueqi, Yan Lin felt that Jiang Pengji was full of ambition. This person's appetite would never be satisfied with Dongqing or the northern borderline. If the Lord allied with her to kill Su Bei and Huang Song, Yan Lin deeply suspected that she would turn around and stab Yang Tao. This woman had done many things to kill her acquaintances. The official said, "Sai, if we send troops to attack Huang Song and Su Bei, our supply lines will definitely be tight. If we're not careful, we'll be doomed eternally." This official wasn't exaggerating. He was sincerely considering things for Yang Tao. In his opinion, a man had to be ruthless if he wanted to achieve great things. If Yang Tao rashly sent troops to fight a foreign war to avenge his father, he would suffer greatly. It was better to swallow this hatred. If Zhao Shao fell into Jiang Pengji's hands, He would die anyway. Haven't the Lord thought about your concerns? Yan Lin frowned and let out a long sigh. But, you've only seen the current situation in Nanxing. You haven't considered the situation in the world. Lu Xi is a person with great ambitions. She won't be satisfied with Dongqing or the northern borderline. After she unifies Dongqing, she'll have a year or two to cultivate. Nanxing will be her next target. Zhangzhou must not be lost. Without Zhangzhou as the front line, Jiang Pengji could send troops to the border after unifying Dongqing. By then, Yang Tao would be in a dangerous situation. When the official heard this, his expression changed drastically. After a while he said, Lu Xi is just a woman. How can she be so ambitious? Yan Lin didn't speak. What did ambition have to do with whether she was a woman or not? Or perhaps, in many people's minds, Jiang Pengji should be satisfied with conquering Dongqing? Yan Lin said indifferently, the northern borderline has been destroyed for almost a year. She had even destroyed the northern borderline. Why did people always think that she was a woman who could be easily fooled? If all the women in the backyard behaved like her, there would be no place for men in the world. The official looked embarrassed. After a while, he took his leave. Yan Lin said to the back hall, My lord, come out. Yang Tao poked his head out to take a look at the enemy situation. Seeing that the official had really left, he felt relieved and came out. Xiaoyang, you don't agree with the alliance either? The pros and cons are equal. It's all up to my lord. From Yan Lin's point of view, it didn't matter which side he chose. But since Yang Tao wanted to fight, he could only support him. Yang Tao said, I once swore in front of my father's coffin that I would kill Zhao Xiao with my own hands. Now that Zhao Xiao has sided with Su Bei, and Su Bei has taken half of my state, we have to settle the score no matter what. Moreover, if we can take back Zhangzhou, we can use it as an outpost to restrain Lu Xi. The first two sentences were from Yang Tao's heart. The last sentence was plagiarizing Yan Lin's idea. Yan Lin didn't expose him. Instead, he smiled faintly and said, That's what I was thinking. Wei Ci was very efficient, but sending troops to war was different from other things. It required a certain amount of preparation time. Yang Tao's troops had yet to set off, but Jiang Pengji's side couldn't help but take the lead and break the stalemate. In the beginning, they were just probing each other. Every time they fought, there were only about 100 casualties. It was a small skirmish. It was the same principle as scratching an itch through one's boots. They couldn't really scratch the itch. Instead, the more they scratched, the more itchy it became. Su Bei could still keep his composure, but Jiang Pengji felt some pressure. If the supply line was too long, it would inevitably increase the logistical pressure. The cost of fighting a war would be even higher than that of the northern borderline. Huang Song and Su Bei secretly formed an alliance and secretly sent troops to war. As the saying goes, hit the snake where it hurts. If the supply line was tight, they would attack it first. Chapter 1167. The grain transportation line was a top secret, but there was no such thing as an impenetrable wall in the world. It was impossible to guard against the scouts and spies alone. Jiang Pengji was handling military affairs and inspecting the training of the troops. The messenger had something to report. What happened? She asked. The 50,000 don of grain transported from Xing City in Hu County was attacked. The messenger said with a heavy expression. Jiang Pengji crushed the pen in her hand. She didn't show any agitation, but her eyes turned cold. What do you mean? The grain transported from Xing City in Hu County was attacked? Jiang Pengji asked. Who attacked? The messenger didn't answer, but she had an idea. Su Bei's troops were almost all under her nose. The person who could attack the grain line without anyone noticing must be Huang Song. The messenger said, although the attacker didn't show his flag, from the weapons we found, it should be Huang Song. The weapons were engraved with the surname Yuan and a simple family emblem. The Yuan family was Huang Song's family. Jiang Pengji gritted her teeth in anger. It was too inconvenient to transmit information in ancient times. When she received the news that the grain team was attacked, Huang Song had gone home early. Do the military advisors know about this? Have you sent anyone to intercept them? Jiang Pengji knew that the 50,000 dawn of grain could not be kept, but those who came to steal the grain could not think about leaving. They had to stay alive. What are their arrangements? Jiang Pengji was overseeing the main army. These days, she had been handling military affairs and calming people down. Yang Si and the others were at the front lines. Naturally, their reaction speed was much faster than hers. If they sent troops to intercept them in time, they might even be able to beat those thieves to the ground and send them to the King of Hell. The messenger said, military advisor Qiguan learned about this and has already sent troops to intercept them. Jiang Pengji trusted Qiguan Rank's ability. Since he had taken action, he would not let Huang Song leave unscathed. Even so, Jiang Pengji was so angry that her liver hurt. She had spent a lot of money to build the heavy cavalry battalion. Even if she recovered by plundering the nobles of the northern borderline, she still felt that she was poor. In troubled times, no matter how precious jewels and gold were, they were not as precious as grain. Although Hu County was a major grain-producing county with a large area of arable land, it was not easy for farmers to farm. Grain was planted, not conjured. Every grain was precious. She couldn't help but clench her fists at the thought of Huang Song stealing or burning 50,000 dawn of grain. The audience in the streaming room had been following Jiang Pengji for some years. Occasionally, they could guess her mood from her expression and gaze. Needless to say, given the situation before him, she was definitely angry. Huahua loves pig head. Host, don't be angry. Our 850,000 salted fish army supports you. 50,000 dawn of grain is nothing. Each of us will give you some as a tip. When the time comes, you can exchange it for 1,000,000 dawn of grain. Eat one bowl and throw it away. Cook one pot and throw it away. Let those poor bastards see the might of a nouveau riche. He wanted to let them know one thing. With money, you can really do whatever you want. I'm not angry anymore. Judge you. Well, let me ask a stupid question. Is 50,000 dawn of grain a lot? Jiang Pengji rarely got angry. Many of the audience had been following her novel for so many years, but until now, they had never seen any expression other than a calm or smiling expression on her face. Lao Ciji Lianming. 50,000 dawn is a lot. If you guys have been following her updates since a long time ago, you should know that the host once did a show in Hejin County where she limited the purchase of grain to suppress the price of grain. At that time, the host didn't have much grain on her hands. She had to make a tight calculation and barely suppressed the price of ordinary grain in Hejin County. Think about it. How much is 50,000 dawn? If it falls into Huang Song's hands, he won't leave it for the host even if he burns it. Gue Kai Guo Fengxiu. According to my observations over the years, one dawn in this world is about 50 kilograms. Let me calculate for you guys. If an adult eats one catty a day, then 10,000 people will eat 10,000 catties, which is equivalent to 5,000 kilograms, which is 100 dawn. With the intuitive numbers, the audience could not help but gasp. Tudu Feiqiu. That's not right. The cooks who transport the grain also need to eat. Their grain is also paid from the total amount of grain transported. Xinjia. But I remember that Xing City in Hu County is only 7 or 8 days' journey on foot from the front line. No matter how much the cooks can eat, how much can they eat? When the 50,000 dawn of grain is transported to the front line, there will definitely be a large portion left. Now that Huang Song has intercepted it, it would be strange if the host doesn't feel distressed. The audience was already used to the plot of television dramas. They thought that millions of dawn of grain could be easily taken out to fight a war. Little did they know that 50,000 dawn of grain could already support a small-scale war. It was true that Jiang Pengji did not lack grain, but it did not mean that she would not feel distressed if the enemy intercepted or burned her grain. The audience was silent for a moment. Zhongfei Yesterday's Stars. I remember that when the Dongqing earthquake occurred in Shangjing, the streamer seemed to have exchanged a lot of grain from the streaming system. 50,000 dawn of grain is indeed a lot, but there are more people in our streaming room. A conservative estimate is that if each person donates one caddy of grain, it should be enough. Because Jiang Pengji was too unconventional, she had only once asked for a reward during the time when she had been streaming for many years. If not for someone reminding her, the audience would have almost forgotten that she had a golden finger of the system. What was there to be afraid of when there was a lack of grain? The 850,000 salted fish lacked everything except 3 to 5 caddies of grain. As long as Zhang Pengji asked, they would definitely donate. They had been freeloading in the streaming room for many years. Now that they finally had a reason to spend money, they must let the people in the other world see their extravagance. Lu Yakong. Yes, yes. Streamer, let us drown Huang's song with grain. The audience's interest was aroused. Before the tycoon could give a reward, Zhang Pengji actually stopped him. Host V. No need. Keep it to buy candy for yourself. Even if you give me a reward, I won't exchange it for grain. It's meaningless. Zhang Pengji had her own considerations. The earthquake in Shangjing was a last resort. Now that they were far from being at the end of the line, she would not use the system's exchange platform. It was not because she wanted to save face, but because she had to pay a price if she used it. Taking 10,000 steps back, if there was really a shortage of grain, she would not need the audience to give her a reward. After so many years of streaming, her popularity points had long accumulated to a terrifying number. If she really exchanged it for grain, not to mention drowning Huang's song, she could drown all the people in the 5 countries in the world in the sea of rice. Hearing her say so, the audience could only suppress the impulse to stick their heads out. Qianshang Nanbai Yueguang. Okay, Brainiac, I'll go buy candy now. Zhang Pengji. After the audience's interruption, Zhang Pengji's anger was also replaced by reason. Qingqing Liye. Streamer, without the 50,000 dawn of grain, will the army be short of grain? There was no one in the tent. Zhang Pengji said in a low voice. No. We can't put all our eggs in one basket. Similarly, there will not be only one grain line. Hu County and Xingqing are one. There are a few others. Without the 50,000 dawn, they will at most suffer a little, but they will not starve. Not to mention, Qiguan Rang would not let Huang's song take advantage of them and escape unscathed. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.